Chapter 933. Demonic Centipede Great Land. After dissolving Yi Chen's vibrating sword power with one palm, Demonic Centipede King's right hand made a half circle, and another palm was thrown out. This palm was twice as powerful as the previous one. The bright chi was like a huge magnetic field, and all the pressure was gathered inside. Wherever it went, the Demonic Centipede palm power that had not dissipated before was all sucked in, and the power was even more powerful. Heaven-wounding sword. Yi Chen's spirit, chi, and spirit were highly concentrated. He could feel that Demonic Centipede King's killing move could not only dissolve the chi power, but it could also easily dissolve a person. If he was not careful, this consciousness body might be turned into nothingness. Holding the evil shattering sword with both hands, Yi Chen's waist twisted, and the evil shattering sword was like a green dragon coming out of its cave, carrying a terrifying vibrating power. It flew out madly, and the ripples spread out in a fan shape. Boom! The two completely different powers clashed together, and the space was shattered, and a huge black hole appeared. This black hole was so big that a mountain could be filled in. Luckily, the two of them were fighting in the sky, otherwise the whole Zhongtian sect would have been sucked in by the hole, and would have been smashed to pieces. Demonic Centipede King's power was much stronger than Yi Chen's consciousness body. After the Demonic Centipede palm power dispelled the vibrating sword power with some difficulty, it rushed towards Yi Chen like a hot knife through butter. Looking at this posture, the remaining power was still comparable to a 3-star, overlord, level, and at this time, Yi Chen's old power had been used up, and he had not recovered yet, so how could he block it? So Yi Chen dodged. The space twisted slightly, and Yi Chen appeared dozens of miles away as if he had teleported, dodging the Demonic Centipede palm power. Without a sound, the mountains below Yi Chen turned into nothingness, all turned into dust by the Demonic Centipede palm power. In the void, there was a strong voltage, and the attribute of the voltage was darkness. Demonic Centipede palm, and it contained the two profound meanings of darkness and thunder. This martial art is simply invincible. It's unlikely that he created it himself. It was not difficult to shatter the mountains into dust. However, it was difficult to shatter them into dust. The profoundness of the heavenly demonic transformation hand was extremely profound. It was definitely a peak profound martial technique. However, the demonic king had not raised the might of this martial technique to the level of a peak profound martial technique. Otherwise, the demonic king would be able to fight against a sovereign. Just as Yi Chen had expected, the demonic hand transformation was indeed not created by the demon king, but by a senior of the Terminator demon sect. In order to bring out the full potential of the demonic hand transformation, the profound truths of darkness and lightning had to be perfected and perfectly fused. The demon king was still very far from this step. Yi Chen, you are not my opponent. I advise you to stop. We only want the Savage Stone. The Demon Sea King advised. The Savage Stone was left behind by Senior Battle King for his descendants. The ones who should stop are you. Yi Chen knew that he could not take a step back at this time. Not to mention that Senior Battle King had helped him comprehend the Immortal sword intent, he could not retreat for himself. Once he retreated, others would think that he was afraid of the Terminator demon sect. As a peak king, he had to be tough when he needed to be. That way, he would be able to avoid trouble. If he kept a low profile, he would only be forced into a corner. As the saying goes, a kind person would be bullied, and a kind horse would be ridden. At this time, he had to hold his ground and not waver. Then don't blame me. A cold light flickered in the Demon Sea King's eyes. He planned to destroy this consciousness projection of Yi Chen. He did not believe that Yi Chen would chase after him for a consciousness projection. The reason why the Terminator demon sect was able to stand at the peak of the Blood Sky continent was not only because of their reputation, but also because of their absolute strength. Demonic Void. With a roar, the Demon Sea King used the Sky Demonic Hand's true ace attack. One palm attack shattered the void, turning it into nothingness. If Yi Chen wanted to use the space profound movement art to avoid the attack, it would be 10 times harder. This martial art is indeed ridiculously powerful. Yi Chen had never seen such a powerful martial art before. Of course, this did not mean that the Sky Demonic Hand was invincible. The main reason was that Yi Chen had just entered the life and death realm, and had not fought with many life and death realm kings, not to mention a titled king. That day, the Black Dragon Old Ancestor had only warned him, and the two did not fight. However, as of now, the Sky Demonic Hand was undoubtedly the most powerful martial art that Yi Chen had ever seen. I wonder how powerful the two peak profound martial arts left behind by Senior Fire Emperor will be. Fire Emperor was already dead, and his storage ring contained the two peak profound martial arts he was most proud of. One was Merciless Water and Fire, and the other was Sun Glory. Merciless Water and Fire naturally contained Water Profound and Fire Profound, while Sun Glory contained three great profounds: Fire Profound, Earth Profound, and Water Profound. If Yi Chen were not a sword cultivator, he would have long since been prepared to learn these two peak profounds. Unfortunately, he was a sword artist, and could not perfectly use Merciless Water and Sun Glory. He could only wait for the day when he could fuse the essence of these two moves into his own sword arts and create his own peak profound sword arts. Facing this move, Yi Chen had no intention of facing it head-on, because doing so would only lead to death. Sword Domain erupted, and Yi Chen hastily retreated. At this moment, the effect of Sword Domain was much greater than Space Profound. Not only could it weaken the might of the demonic hand, it could also sharply increase his speed. On the other hand, Space Profound was restricted by space, and the space was too chaotic. With Yi Chen's current Space Profound, he didn't have much confidence in dodging. Shenhu had said before that apart from some titled kings proficient in speed, there would not be more than 3 to 5 people who could deal with Yi Chen. Demonic Beast King could not deal with Yi Chen's main body, but if he was stronger than Yi Chen, he could threaten Yi Chen. Since Demonic Beast King had Sky Demonic Hand, it could not be ruled out that others had some moves that could restrain Space Profound. But even though Yi Chen had used Sword Domain to weaken a portion of the Demonic Hand's might and dodged it rapidly, the Demonic Void was ultimately the Sky Demonic Hand's true ultimate move. Half of Yi Chen's body was still brushed by it. The price was that he lost half of his strength, and his consciousness avatar almost collapsed. If it came again, his consciousness avatar would be destroyed without a doubt. My main body is here. At this moment, Yi Chen revealed a faint smile. Yi Chen, take another palm strike from me. The Demonic Beast King was unforgiving. He followed up with a palm strike, and space shattered once again. The violent spatial power made it difficult to even stabilize one's body, let alone teleport. But Yi Chen did not dodge or evade. He even put away his evil vanquishing sword. What's going on? The Iron Hoof Demon King, Silver Leopard King, and Mantis Queen were somewhat puzzled. Could it be that Yi Chen believed that he was no match for the Demonic Beast King and was prepared to stop resisting? Just as the demonic palm was about to hit Yi Chen's body, another Yi Chen suddenly appeared in front of Yi Chen. The main body had arrived. Shielding his consciousness avatar behind him, Yi Chen casually pulled out the Sky Scorpio sword and slashed out. Poochie. The demonic beast palm was said to be able to transform all living things. But in front of absolute strength, it still hit a wall. It was sliced in two by Yi Chen's sword, and a several li-long crack appeared in the space. This is the strength of Yi Chen's main body. Yi Chen's sudden appearance startled the demonic beast king, but he quickly regained his calm. The Sky Demonic Beast King was almost invincible in the same realm. Even when facing a peak king with high-rank 4-star battle strength, he could dissolve a portion of the opponent's energy. However, he discovered that Yi Chen's sword energy was very hard to dissolve. This martial art is not bad. Yi Chen was not surprised by this result. His sword contained the destruction sword intent. Destruction. What was destruction? It was naturally able to destroy all living things. In the end, the Sky Demonic Beast King was trained, so how could it dissolve the vibrating sword energy containing the destruction sword intent? The reason why it could dissolve the vibrating sword energy of the consciousness avatar was because the consciousness avatar's destruction sword intent was not strong enough. You take a sword of mine as well. Yi Chen held the sword with one hand and slashed down. It was still the sky-cutting sword. Ang! A dazzling golden light filled the demonic beast king's vision. Demonic beast void. The demonic beast king's Jin Yuan exploded to the limit as he slashed out a palm at the golden light. Peng! The golden light disappeared, but the demonic beast king's body seemed to have been struck by lightning, flying backward and spurting out a large amount of blood. What a destruction sword intent! Forcefully stabilizing his body, the demonic beast king wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. The demonic beast king was a peak king after all. His cultivation base was over 1,000 years. Although the purity of his Jin Yuan was not as pure as Yi Chen's, when the quantity reached a certain level, it still had a huge effect. Compared to Yi Chen, the demonic beast king's cultivation base was definitely 5 times the former. Therefore, 50% of Yi Chen's sword's power was cancelled out by the demonic beast palm force, and 30% by his protective Jin Yuan. The vibrating power that was transmitted into his body was only the last 20%, which was not enough to heavily injure the demonic beast king. Nirvana spatial freeze. The demonic beast king cultivated the same cultivation technique as the Terminator demon sect leader, Nirvana demon emperor. The Nirvana demon art could give rise to the Nirvana domain. The demonic beast king naturally had not reached that step, but he was close. As he madly pushed the Nirvana demon art, the space immediately condensed, and cracks appeared. These cracks became still. Yi Chen felt the restriction on his body increase. The demonic beast king's Nirvana spatial freeze didn't surprise him too much. However, when combined with the opponent's over 1,000 years cultivation base, the restriction became much stronger. Demonic beast king, you're not my opponent. Stop. Yi Chen turned a blind eye to all of this. The victor has yet to be decided. You're speaking too early. The demonic beast king was very confident in his strength. He knew that Yi Chen's greatest weakness was that his cultivation base wasn't deep enough. If the battle continued, the scales of victory would tilt towards him. Seems like you won't give up until you reach the Yellow River. Yi Chen didn't continue persuading him. The Sky Scorpio sword swung out, withdrawing 50% of its power. Buzz. Immediately, an invisible ripple spread out, and the Nirvana domain created by the demonic beast king was immediately torn open. The ripple instantly spread to his body. Peng 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 peng. This sword wasn't an ordinary killing move, but the true heaven-inflicted sword. Withdrawing 50% of its power, there was still 50% of it rushing out. The demonic beast king felt as if there were many explosives buried in his body, exploding simultaneously. Blood splattered, and even his bones were blown out. It should be known that Yi Chen's heaven-inflicted sword could even destroy stars, let alone a human body. And this was when he was still holding back. Chapter 934. Too powerful. He definitely has peak 4-star battle strength. Mantis Queen cried out involuntarily. The gap between 3 stars and 4 stars was huge. Within 4 stars, the gap was also huge, but it was still limited. If Yi Chen had high 4-star battle strength, he would at most be 3 to 4 times stronger than Demon Nightmare King, and would not be able to injure him in a few moves. Only peak 4-star battle strength, 2 small realms higher than Demon Nightmare King, could he easily suppress him. Previously, the reason why Yi Chen could contend with Demon Nightmare King with his mental perception body was mainly because his space profound was too profound, and his dodging speed was extremely fast. Otherwise, with his mental perception body's strength as a 3-star tyrant, he would not be able to exchange 1 or 2 moves with mid-4-star battle strength Demon Nightmare King. After all, the gap between the two was too big. Demon Nightmare King, you guys go back. Putting away the Sky Scorpio sword, Yi Chen said indifferently. Cough cough cough. Demon Nightmare King continuously coughed out blood clots from his mouth. There were dozens of bloody holes on his body, and each of them had pierced through his body, exposing even his bones. He hurriedly operated his undying body to recover from his frightening injuries. Demon Nightmare King raised his head and said in a hoarse voice, Yi Chen, I admit that you are very powerful. In this world, no one has made as much progress as you. You have peak 4-star battle strength as soon as you enter life and death realm. However, I advise you not to meddle in things that you shouldn't meddle in. The 4 of us are only here to probe you. The truly powerful figures have yet to arrive. It turned out that Demon Nightmare King and the other three already knew that Yi Chen would meddle in this matter. On the surface, they were trying to seize the Savage Stone, but they were secretly trying to probe Yi Chen's bottom line. Of course, the Savage Stone was their ultimate goal. Powerful figures? I see. Yi Chen thought for a while and immediately understood. It seemed like all of the king warriors in the Blood Skyland had been eyeing the Savage Stone for a long time. However, the school had the protection of the Fire Emperor. Who was the Fire Emperor? He was a peak warrior with a 6-star battle power, and it would be hard to find someone who could compete with him in the whole true spirit world. Once he got angry, who would dare to say anything? He wanted to protect the school, and whoever dared to touch the school would be courting death. However, 500 years had passed, and the Fire Emperor had not appeared for a long time, which would inevitably raise people's suspicions. Because of the Fire Emperor's accumulated power, everyone was still waiting. Right now, they could not wait any longer, so they sent 4 king warriors to test the waters. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Frowning, he felt for the first time how deep the water in the Blood Skyland was. All of the king warriors had their eyes on the Savage Stone of the Zhongtian Martial School, and he alone was too weak. Yi Chen, leave now. There is still a chance. Demon Nightmare King saw that Yi Chen was deep in thought and shouted. Taking a deep breath, Yi Chen lifted up his eyes and said, "Today's matter, I am definitely going to get involved." Demon Nightmare King's expression changed, and he was about to speak. "Since you do not want to leave, then don't." The void trembled, and 3 figures seemed to have passed through space and appeared not far away. Of these 3 people, one was a black-haired middle-aged man with disdainful eyes that carried the intent of nirvanic extermination. Another was a hunchbacked old woman with triangular eyes that were rather sinister. The last one was a burly and valiant middle-aged man with blood-red hair and a mouth full of sharp teeth. Destructive Demon Emperor, Ancient Camel Granny Xian, Bloodshark King. Yi Chen recognized the 3 immediately. The black-haired middle-aged man was the leader of the destructive demon sect, Destructive Demon Emperor. The hunchbacked old woman was the leader of the Ancient Camel sect, Ancient Camel Granny Xian. The blood-haired middle-aged man was the leader of the Bloodshark family, Bloodshark King. Destructive Demon Emperor was one of the few titled monarchs in Bloodsky Continent. Ancient Camel Granny Xian was a 4-star tyrant, and Bloodshark King was a peak 4-star warrior. The formation formed by the 3 of them was extremely powerful. One was a titled monarch king, and the other 2 were peak-tier kings with peak 4-star battle power. Sect leader. Demon Nightmare Dynasty's Destructive Demon Emperor cupped his hands. Demon Emperor, Xian Granny, Bloodshark King, Mantis Queen, Silver Leopard King, and Iron Hoofbeast King also cupped their fists. Destructive Demon Emperor nodded slightly and his eyes landed on Yi Chen. In the next second, his body shook and a vast demonic Jin Yuan spread out, affecting the surreal space. Black metal patterns appeared in the surreal space, cold, lonely, and lifeless. Nirvana Domain. Different from Demon Nightmare King's Nirvana Stare, Destructive Demon Emperor's Nirvana Domain contained the power of rules, and it was the extremely rare Nirvana rules. Even if it was only a trace, it was still dozens of times more powerful than Nirvana Stare. Creak creak. Yi Chen could feel his protective Jin Yuan groaning and his bones groaning. Nirvana Domain ignored all defenses and affected the inside of his body, causing his battle power to drop to the bottom. If he didn't respond immediately, Yi Chen had no doubt that Destructive Demon Emperor would kill him. Boom. Originally, the Sword Domain's release was silent. However, due to the Nirvana Domain's existence, the 2 fiercely collided. This collision turned formless into tangible, forming a clear dividing line. At the same time, the pressure within Yi Chen's body disappeared, completely expelled by the Sword Domain. Sword Domain against Nirvana Domain. Second layer of Sword Domain. Destructive Demon Emperor, who was about to attack, narrowed his eyes. Among all the titled monarchs, the one he feared the most was Azure Cloud Sword Emperor, because Azure Cloud Sword Emperor's Sword Domain had reached the 3rd layer, completely suppressing his Nirvana Domain. Yi Chen's Sword Domain was far from Azure Cloud Sword Emperor's, but at least it had formed sword rules. If Yi Chen's cultivation base was a bit higher, his Nirvana Domain would probably be useless. With a light snort, the color of Nirvana Demon Emperor's Nirvana domain deepened. The surrounding space seemed to have turned into metal, giving off a feeling of hopeless loneliness. Yi Chen's expression didn't change. He operated Green Lotus sword arts to the limit, and the powerful sword domain fought against the Nirvana domain. As the pressure increased, the sword domain changed. Above Yi Chen's head, an illusory sword shadow appeared, as if it didn't exist in this world. Peak of the second layer of sword domain. Facing the huge pressure, Yi Chen had a breakthrough. This. Granny Xian and Bloodshark King didn't expect Yi Chen's sword domain to be able to fight against Destructive Demon Emperor's Nirvana domain. It should be known that Destructive Demon Emperor's cultivation base was more than 2,000 years. With 2,000 years of cultivation base to support the Nirvana domain, his innate advantage was far beyond Yi Chen's. However, at this moment, Destructive Demon Emperor only had a slight advantage. The Great Destruction Demon Emperor felt somewhat embarrassed. He was a demonic cultivator, and the most important thing was to be carefree. Therefore, he had always been domineering, not allowing others to resist. Even if Yi Chen was a genius comparable to the ancient times, he wouldn't give him the slightest bit of face. Originally, he wanted to use the Nirvana domain to seal Yi Chen, making it impossible for him to escape. However, Yi Chen's sword domain made him miscalculate. With the sword domain, his plan to seal Yi Chen would fail. Sizzle. The Nirvana domain shone with a layer of cold light. Destructive Demon Emperor pushed the Nirvana domain to the limit and said coldly, "If you want to fight against me, then you must be prepared to die." Boom. Destructive Demon Emperor threw a palm toward Yi Chen. There was an ancient word imprinted on his palm, King. King killing palm. King exterminating palm shot out, and a huge palm silhouette shrouded Yi Chen. The word King on it carried a domineering aura of supremacy and killing intent. Yi Chen's scalp went numb. Destructive Demon Emperor's King killing palm made him feel the threat of death. If he couldn't dodge this palm, he would die for sure. Pop! The space warped, and Yi Chen disappeared. The sword domain also disappeared along with him. Without the sword domain's resistance, the Nirvana domain of Demon Emperor occupied even more territory. The shadow of a huge palm covered the heaven and earth, causing the sun and moon to lose their radiance and the stars to darken. Along the way, a vast expanse of space was destroyed. A frightening spatial power, pushed by the King Annihilation Palm, formed a spatial storm that connected the heavens and earth. As long as Yi Chen appeared, he would immediately be enveloped. Yi Chen didn't dare to stop for a moment. He used his space-profound movement skill to teleport 3 or 4 times. He only stopped when the power of the king-killing palm weakened. At this time, he was already 10,000 miles away. In other words, within 10,000 miles, the king-killing palm could kill him. Terrifying. Yi Chen could only use one word to describe the Nirvana Demon Emperor and Demon Emperor's king-killing palm. Terrifying. Extremely terrifying. Can you escape? Nirvana Demon Emperor's figure flickered as he chased. Granny Xian, Bloodshark Monarch, and the other 4 monarchs followed closely. Yi Chen, I told you to leave. Now you can't leave even if you want to. The Demon King knew Nirvana Demon Emperor's temper very well. He was a man of his word. Because he had mastered the Nirvana domain, he was extremely murderous. He didn't attack, but when he did, he would strike like lightning without any hesitation. Yi Chen, if you think that you can be fearless just because Patriarch Black Dragon can't do anything to you, then you are gravely mistaken. The people that I, Nirvana Demon Emperor, want to kill have never survived. The existence of the Nirvana domain allowed Nirvana Demon Emperor's speed to reach an unimaginable level. He was only slightly slower than Yi Chen's space-profound movement skill. Not to mention Nirvana Demon Emperor, any titled monarch's speed would not be slow. Those who could surpass titled monarchs were all peak monarchs with extremely high achievements in speed. At most, I have a 40% chance of escaping. Yi Chen sighed inwardly. Nirvana Demon Emperor was worthy of being Nirvana Demon Emperor. He was not someone he could contend against at his current stage. Without escaping, Yi Chen took out the high sight painting from his storage ring. With a shake of his hand, the painting unfolded. Senior Yuan Emperor, Sorry for disturbing you. Buzz. The ink-like figure wriggled, and Yuan Emperor's image walked out. As soon as he appeared, Yuan Emperor saw a palm with the word king covering the sky and covering the earth. The sun, moon, and stars dimmed as killing intent filled the sky. What a good demonic martial skill. Yuan Emperor's expression turned grave. His clothes fluttered without any wind, and a domain different from sword domain and nirvana domain burst out. At the same time, Yuan Emperor's body blossomed with boundless light as he punched out. This punch was incomparably vast and resplendent. If King Extermination Palm was tyrannical and filled with killing intent, then Yuan Emperor's punch was filled with the aura of the Imperial Tao. Chapter 935. Rumble. Yuan Emperor's supreme art clashed with Nirvana Demon Emperor's King Annihilation Palm. For a moment, sand and pebbles were blown into the air within a radius of 10,000 li. Within a radius of 1,000 li, a storm was formed, flattening everything in its path. Within a radius of 100 li, the space within 100 li was shattered like a spiderweb. At the center of the spiderweb was an energy ball with a diameter of 100 meters. Granny Xian, Bloodshark King, and the others were hundreds of li away, but they were still blown away by the huge shockwave. Apart from the first two, the others all vomited large mouthfuls of blood. Yi Chen was safe because he was standing behind Yuan Emperor. The energy ball suddenly dissipated, and Yuan Emperor and Nirvana Demon Emperor each took a dozen steps back. Kid, you really know how to provoke enemies. Last time it was a human demon emperor, and this time it's a demonic titled monarch. Tilting his head, Yuan Emperor said helplessly. Yi Chen said apologetically, Senior, I'll have to trouble you again this time. Looking back at Nirvana Demon Emperor, Yuan Emperor said, fine. Instead of being sealed in an ink painting and never seeing the light of day, it's better to let out one last ray of light. As a famous titled monarch in the past, Yuan Emperor preferred to live a passionate life. Although being sealed in an ink painting could preserve his vitality, it was not a life he liked. The reason he left this ink painting was to deal with the alien races, not to extend his life in another way. Infinite Light, Emperor Tao Divine Fist. Who are you to Yuan Emperor? With Nirvana Demon Emperor's status and eyesight, when Yuan Emperor used his ultimate skill, his body burst out with infinite light, and his fist technique was filled with the aura of the Emperor Tao. It was very similar to the supreme skill of Yuan Emperor in the records, so he asked subconsciously. But after asking, he shook his head, no, you are not a pure flesh and blood life form. You used a special method to seal part of your true Yuan and use it to create flesh and blood, which can be exchanged. You can think of me as Yuan Emperor's avatar. Yuan Emperor had no intention of hiding his identity. Yuan Emperor's avatar. Nirvana Demon Emperor was dazed. The next moment, his eyes burst out with astonishing light. Yuan Emperor's avatar, this was equivalent to admitting his true identity as Yuan Emperor. Granny Xian, Bloodshark King, and the others also reacted. They were all dumbfounded. The Yuan Emperor from tens of thousands of years ago had actually appeared here, even if it wasn't his true body. Yi Chen, I didn't think that before you fell, you would do something that made me feel good. I, the Great Destruction Demon Emperor, have always wanted to see how powerful the ancient titled monarchs of the same era were. But, the ancient people have already passed away, and this wish of mine is hard to realize. I thought that I could only live in regret for the rest of my life, but I didn't expect it to come true today. The Great Destruction Demon Emperor was overjoyed. He knew that it was impossible for him to possess the strength of the Yuan Emperor. He wanted to know who was stronger between him and the Yuan Emperor at the same cultivation realm. This guy still has such a wish. Yi Chen rolled his eyes. He had talked to Yuan Emperor before. Yuan Emperor's battle prowess was indeed inferior to the Demon Flower Emperor. According to some information in Monarch, Nirvana Demon Emperor was slightly inferior to the Demon Flower Emperor. Even if he hid his strength, he would at most be on par with the Demon Flower Emperor. It was impossible for him to surpass the Demon Flower Emperor. However, Yuan Emperor also said that under normal battle prowess, although he was inferior to the Demon Flower Emperor, if they were to fight to the death, the Demon Flower Emperor would definitely suffer serious injuries that couldn't be healed in a short period of time. It would be impossible for him to recover to his peak within 3 to 5 years. At that time, the reason why he was glad that the Demon Flower Emperor didn't make a move was because Yi Chen's strength was too weak. Even if the Demon Flower Emperor was seriously injured, he could easily crush Yi Chen. But now, Yi Chen's strength was not something that a monarch could crush easily. Once the Nirvana Demon Emperor was seriously injured, it was very likely that he wouldn't be Yi Chen's opponent. As for Jiyu Tuor Xian Granny and Bloodshark King, it was even more impossible for them to stop Yi Chen. But to be honest, when fighting with the Nirvana Demon Emperor, the Yuan Emperor had an innate disadvantage that couldn't be made up. His Zhen Yuan was too little, and his soul force was far weaker than a monarch of the same rank. If the Nirvana Demon Emperor was replaced by the Yuan Emperor, he might not even have the strength of a monarch. The Nirvana Demon Emperor's words made Yi Chen feel a little shameless. The Yuan Emperor didn't feel that it was fair or unfair. He said indifferently, "Since your wish is so strong, then I will satisfy you. I'm just afraid that the process and result of realizing your wish won't satisfy you. I think I will be satisfied." The Nirvana Demon Emperor's eyes turned cold. Kill. Throwing away all distracting thoughts, the Nirvana Demon Emperor's figure was like a ghost, hovering between illusion and reality. He charged toward the Yuan Emperor. The space barrier was nothing in his eyes. The Yuan Emperor's figure suddenly moved, and the space barrier couldn't stop him. He could enter the void or the outside world at any time. Boom, 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 boom. As soon as the two came into contact, they immediately started fighting. The sky darkened, and the sun and moon lost their light. The surrounding 10,000 miles became the battlefield of the two. Because the two were moving too fast, they were still here at one moment, but in the next moment, they were thousands of miles away. The Jiyu Tuor Xian Granny, Bloodshark King, and the others were panicking because they didn't know where was safe. Voila! Suddenly, an invisible palm force slashed toward Jiyu Tuor Xian Po. Jiyu Tuor Xian Po quickly escaped into the void, wanting to avoid the palm force, but the palm force was really strange. It seemed to have the effect of shrinking the earth into an inch. It forcefully slashed her body and cut off her left arm. Ah! The Jiyu Tuor Xian Granny screamed and fled. She flew tens of thousands of miles away before stopping with a pale face. Retreat! The Bloodshark King didn't expect the Yuan Emperor to ambush them while fighting with the Nirvana Demon Emperor. His heart went numb, fearing that the Yuan Emperor would do the same to him. Following closely behind the Jiyu Tuor Xian Granny, the five retreated tens of thousands of miles away. They watched from afar, not daring to approach. Once they sensed the two sides moving over, they would immediately retreat again. Yuan Emperor, don't be presumptuous. The Nirvana Demon Emperor's face was very ugly. Since we are enemies, there is no such thing as presumptuous or not. The Yuan Emperor's answer was very straightforward. Very well, today I will let you, a peerless expert of the past, fall miserably and witness the legend of me, the Nirvana Demon Emperor. The Nirvana Demon Emperor pushed his Zhen Yuan to the limit, not giving the Yuan Emperor a chance to divert his attention to deal with others. As soon as the Nirvana Demon Emperor went all out, the Yuan Emperor became somewhat strained. His regular battle power was weaker than the Nirvana Demon Emperor's, not even 1/10 of his peak strength. King Destruction Heaven Scripture, King Destruction Reincarnation, King Destruction Tao. Destroy, destroy, destroy. The Nirvana Demon Emperor unleashed the killing moves of the king, exterminating palm one after another. Each move was stronger and more domineering than the last. The startling sky and the extreme Taiji barrier above his head were ripped apart in a frenzy. It was as though a huge black hole had appeared in the sky, allowing one to see the distant starry sky. The Yuan Emperor retreated again and again, his aura fluctuating. The Yuan Emperor is going to lose, and it is a good loss. The Jiyu Tuor Xian Granny had a lot of resentment towards the Yuan Emperor. At this moment, seeing the Yuan Emperor unable to fight back, a carefree expression appeared on her face, and her sinister eyes were filled with schadenfreude. Let's fight in the starry sky. Using the Nirvana Demon Emperor's palm power, the Yuan Emperor took advantage of the situation to make a turn, breaking through the shocking sky and extreme void barrier, and rushed into the starry sky, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Where do you think you are going? The Nirvana Demon Emperor only felt that his mind was clear. In the past, the peerless experts were beaten by him, which made him extremely happy. Even the Nirvana Demon art seemed to be showing signs of a breakthrough. With a teleport, the Nirvana Demon Emperor also rushed into the starry sky. Go! How could the Gu Tuor Xian Granny, Bloodshark King, and the others miss such a shocking battle? One by one, they also broke through the two heavens and entered the zenith sky, which was the starry sky of the Elysium. Yi Chen looked at the scene of chaos and the eruption of earth fire. He took a deep breath, stirred his Zhen Yuan, and was the last to enter the starry sky. As for his consciousness, he returned to the eternal sky sect. The starry sky was incomparably vast, and the sky was filled with endless stars. In front of him, two figures turned into beams of light, fighting fiercely. From time to time, one could see small stars being destroyed, bursting with brilliant light. However, these lights could not stop the two. Gu Tuor Xian Granny and the others followed from afar. Yi Chen, on the other hand, followed from another direction. The battle between the Yuan Emperor and the Nirvana Demon Emperor was too shocking. It was the first time that Yi Chen saw a battle between titled monarchs. One was the clone of the peerless expert in the past, and the other was a titled monarch. In a certain sense, the two had the same status. After all, in this era, 5-star battle strength was already considered the peak battle strength. Titled monarchs with 6-star battle strength were always elusive, and there were probably only 2 or 3 of them. After sending Yuan Emperor flying hundreds of miles away with a palm strike, the Nirvana Demon Emperor laughed and said, "Yuan Emperor, you are not my opponent. Today, this starry sky will be your final grave." Yuan Emperor did not speak to the Nirvana Demon Emperor. He turned his head and looked at Yi Chen, who was tens of thousands of miles away, and said, "Yi Chen, I will leave that matter to you. Senior Yuan Emperor, actually, I have 40% chance of escaping." Yi Chen somewhat regretted summoning the Yuan Emperor. "No." The Yuan Emperor shook his head. "This battle is what I want the most. How many years has it been since I had such a satisfying battle? Although this is not my peak battle strength, don't forget that if you die, I will fall into the hands of the opponent. So, whether you summon me or not doesn't depend on whether you want to or not. It is something you must do. Otherwise, what is the point of my existence? But don't worry. After this battle, I will at most lose all my strength. I will not disappear. He alone cannot destroy my little bit of light." The Yuan Emperor's eyes were filled with strong confidence. This confidence infected Yi Chen. "Yuan Emperor, it is useless even if you leave your last words. Because he will not be able to escape either." The Nirvana Demon Emperor thought that the Yuan Emperor was leaving his last words, so he sneered. Turning his head, the Yuan Emperor looked at the Nirvana Demon Emperor without any emotion. His eyes were empty, but they did not lose the color of emotion. It was as if he wanted to swallow the entire starry sky. "I will let you see the methods of the ancient titled monarchs." 3 flowers borrowing path. On top of the Yuan Emperor's head, 3 illusory flowers appeared. 1 red, 1 yellow, 1 blue. The 3 flowers complemented each other, giving off a mysterious brilliance. Chapter 936. The means of an ancient titled monarch? That's for the best. Otherwise, what's the point of defeating you? Nirvana Demon Emperor noticed 3 illusory flowers of different colors appearing on top of Yuan Emperor's head. His eyes flashed, and his killing intent became even more intense. More than 2,000 years of cultivation was pushed out. The majestic aura caused a small star nearby to tremble and flicker with starlight. "King Annihilation Dao." Nirvana Demon Emperor roared and pounced at Yuan Emperor. He waved his hand, and an incomparably huge palm light shadow shot towards Yuan Emperor. The king character on it seemed to come alive, wanting to suck in Yuan Emperor and refine him to death. Being able to refine the avatar of the last titled monarch on the Emperor's scar steely to death, Nirvana Demon Emperor was bound to have a breakthrough. Fighting was human nature, and fighting was the source of progress. With 3 flowers floating above his head, Yuan Emperor did not retreat. His body once again blossomed with boundless light as he punched out. Imperial Tao aura filled the air, causing the stars to wail. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion occurred as the 2 secret arts collided once again. A scene that made Granny Shen, Bloodshark Monarch, and the others dumbfounded happened. Nirvana Demon Emperor, who previously held the absolute advantage, was blown away by Yuan Emperor's punch for more than 10,000 miles. Along the way, blood sprayed everywhere like a blood rainbow. Not only were Granny Shen and the others shocked, but even Yi Chen was shocked. He originally thought that after Yuan Emperor used the means of an ancient titled monarch, he would at most be slightly stronger than Nirvana Demon Emperor and make the latter suffer a little. He never expected that Yuan Emperor would send Nirvana Demon Emperor flying without any suspense. Is this the means of an ancient titled monarch? Yi Chen's heart surged. Impossible. On the small star, Nirvana Demon Emperor's figure smashed open a huge crater. He climbed up from the center of the crater, his eyes filled with disbelief. The next moment, he smashed this star that was only a few thousand miles in diameter with 1 palm. The Nirvana domain was pushed to the limit as it rushed towards Yuan Emperor. King Annihilation Hegemony. With blood flowing out of his mouth, Nirvana Demon Emperor ignored it and used the most powerful killing move of King Annihilation Hegemony. Once King Annihilation Hegemony was used, a tyrannical aura soared into the stars. The huge palm shadow was like the palm of a giant, wanting to capture the sun and moon and destroy all life. The boundless light on the Yuan Emperor's body had yet to be extinguished. His glowing fist looked very small, but when he punched out, the only thing left in the world was his fist. It collided violently with the palm silhouette. Puff! Spurting out blood, Nirvana Demon Emperor was sent flying again. This time, he was sent flying even further and faster. You are very lucky, but also very unlucky. I have never used this 3-flower borrowing Tao in Elysium. I only used it when I was crossing the death road. Yuan Emperor's voice wasn't loud, but it spread out majestically. Jiyu Tuor Xian Po, Bloodshark Monarch, and the others heard it. Yi Chen heard it, and Nirvana Demon Emperor also heard it. Yuan Emperor has also crossed the death road? Yi Chen thought. As for Yuan Emperor not using 3-flower borrowing Tao in Elysium, Yi Chen didn't find it strange. At that time in Elysium, who could make Yuan Emperor go all out? Unless it was an ancient titled monarch who left his mark on the Emperor Scar Steely, Yuan Emperor was absolutely invincible. What a good 3-flower borrowing Tao. Nirvana Demon Emperor was a powerful titled monarch in the end. His undying body had reached the stage of blood rebirth. Although Yuan Emperor could suppress him, it would be extremely difficult to kill him. At this moment, although he looked battered and exhausted, his battle prowess hadn't decreased by much. Only his aura was a lot weaker. Swallowing a blood-red dragon eye pill, Nirvana Demon Emperor's expression turned incomparably cold. At the same time, he waved his right hand, and a 3-colored pagoda that was less than a meter tall appeared in his hand. Not good, it's a top-grade defensive artifact. Yi Chen cursed inwardly. There were many types of artifacts. Aside from weapons and armors, there were also some odd-shaped artifacts, such as treasure ships, purple gold arms bowls, pagodas, and so on. Basically, any common object, as long as the material was good and the refining method was good, could be refined into an artifact. Among defensive artifacts, pagoda-type artifacts had always been powerful and extremely difficult to break. Yuan Emperor clearly knew that the 3-colored pagoda in Nirvana Demon Emperor's hand was not ordinary, and his expression became a little more serious. The number of people that can force me to use the Shenyuan pagoda can be counted on one hand. The titled monarchs of ancient times are indeed worthy of being titled monarchs of ancient times. Their methods are unfathomable, but it ends here. Buzz. The Shenyuan pagoda in Nirvana Demon Emperor's hand enlarged, and he himself appeared next to the window of the 5th floor of the Shenyuan pagoda. No wonder titled monarchs rarely fight each other. Once the Shenyuan pagoda appeared, Granny Shen and the others finally understood why titled monarchs rarely fought in Elysium. Not to mention the strength of titled monarchs, because they stood at the peak of Elysium, they could easily obtain many rare treasures. If a titled monarch wanted to kill another titled monarch, not only would they have to defeat the other, they would also have to obtain the other's treasure. If the other had a super treasure that could save their life, killing the other would become impossible. Therefore, titled monarchs rarely fought each other because they knew that the price to kill the other was too great. They couldn't be careless. King Destruction, Heaven's Scripture. In the distance, Nirvana Demon Emperor stood in the Shenyuan Pagoda and sent out a palm strike at Yuan Emperor. He planned on exhausting Yuan Emperor's true Yuan and winning without a fight. The 3 flowers above his head became more and more real. Yuan Emperor didn't retreat, and instead sent out a fist that emitted boundless light to meet the attack. His aura was boundless, covering the entire sky. Boom! The Shenyuan Pagoda was sent flying, and Nirvana Demon Emperor's face paled slightly, but it soon returned to normal. What kind of secret art is this 3 flowers borrowing Dao? It actually increased the other party's battle power to such an extent. Although Nirvana Demon Emperor was safe and sound, Yuan Emperor's battle power was still incredible. One had to know that the other party's battle power was clearly much weaker than his, and he was completely suppressed. Huff! Spitting out a mouthful of turbid air, Yuan Emperor's face was also somewhat pale. The 3 flowers borrowing Dao was a heaven-class peak-tier secret art that he had spent 100 years to create. This secret art was called 3 flowers borrowing Dao, and it was profound. 3 flowers referred to the 3 flowers of essence, qi, and soul. Borrowing Dao meant borrowing the fruit of the Dao from the heavens. Once 3 flowers borrowing Dao was used, essence, qi, and soul would surge. Essence represented the strength of the physical body, qi represented cultivation, and soul represented the martial artist's soul. If a martial artist's essence, qi, and soul increased, their battle power would naturally rise. If their essence, qi, and soul were damaged, their battle power would be greatly reduced, making it difficult for them to display their peak battle power. Using 3 flowers borrowing Dao doubled Yuan Emperor's battle power, which was why he could suppress Nirvana Demon Emperor. However, using 3 flowers borrowing Dao wasn't without a price. When he was at his peak, he could ignore this price. At most, he would be weakened for a period of time. However, he wasn't at his peak, and he wasn't even in his main body. Using 3 flowers borrowing Dao required a huge price. Now, the backlash was quietly approaching him, and he was just waiting for the moment to explode. While I'm still in the 3 flowers borrowing Dao state, I'll heavily injure him while my soul power surges. Making up his mind, Yuan Emperor's aura increased instead of decreasing. Yuan Emperor, I have the protection of the Shenyuan Pagoda. How can you injure me? Nirvana Demon Emperor was fearless as he stood on the 5th floor of the Shenyuan Pagoda. Whether I can injure you or not, you'll find out soon enough. Not using the Emperor Dao Divine Fist again, Yuan Emperor even retracted his domain to preserve his Yuan Qi. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there was a golden halo in the depths of his eyes. Primordial Spirit Lock. With a roar, a golden halo invisible to the naked eye suddenly shot out from between Yuan Emperor's eyebrows. The golden halo was extremely fast, arriving before the Shenyuan Pagoda in the blink of an eye. A secret soul attack technique. A bad premonition flashed across the Nirvana Demon Emperor's heart, but on second thought, his soul wasn't weak, and the Yuan Emperor wasn't his true body. Even if his soul force was enhanced, it wasn't very likely for it to surpass his by too much. If he used a soul defense secret technique, it was hard to say whether his soul would even be slightly injured. Not daring to be careless, the Void Destruction Demon Emperor activated a soul defense secret art and set up layer after layer of soul defenses around his soul sea, making it impenetrable. Silently, the golden halo ignored the Shenyuan Pagoda's protection and directly drilled into Nirvana Demon Emperor's head. There was a moment of silence. Abruptly, Nirvana Demon Emperor's eyes widened, and he let out a mournful scream. The golden halo that Yuan Emperor activated actually wrapped around his soul sea. With just a slight contraction, it shattered the numerous layers of soul defenses. After shattering the soul defenses, the golden halo continued to contract, creating a circle of deep cracks in Nirvana Demon Emperor's soul sea, nearly splitting it in half. As if he had lost his mind, Nirvana Demon Emperor's body shook violently, and blood flowed from his 7 orifices. His originally strong aura suddenly weakened to the point where it was far inferior to Yi Chen's. "I hate this." After screaming, Nirvana Demon Emperor frantically activated the Shenyuan Pagoda and fled. He no longer had the demeanor of an emperor monarch. Sect Master Demon King was more anxious than anyone. Looking at Nirvana Demon Emperor's appearance, he must have been seriously injured. Otherwise, he wouldn't have fled so desperately. This meant that he felt a strong life and death crisis. If he didn't flee, he might die. Demon King chased after him. Jiyu Tuor Xianpo, Bloodshark King, and the others naturally didn't dare to stay. Once Nirvana Demon Emperor left, all of them together wouldn't be able to withstand a single punch from Yuan Emperor. Everyone left, leaving only Yuan Emperor and Yi Chen. Puff! The tricolored flower above his head shattered, and Yuan Emperor's figure suddenly became illusory. The loss of power couldn't be suppressed, and it caused all sorts of strange phenomena. Senior Yuan Emperor. Yi Chen hurriedly went forward, wanting to support him. However, when his hands came into contact with the primitive emperor's body, he touched thin air. Yuan Emperor shook his head. "Don't worry, I've only lost all my power. It won't disappear." Primordial Spirit Lock was a heaven-class peak-tier soul attack secret technique he created. It was incomparably overbearing, but it also took away a small amount of his soul power. Adding the backlash from the tricolored flower dissipating, it was already his greatest effort to not disappear. In the future, he would truly lose all his fighting strength, and would no longer be able to help Yi Chen in battle. Chapter 937. In the battle between Yuan Emperor and Nirvana Demon Emperor, apart from Yi Chen, Granny Jiyu Tuor, Bloodshark King, and other life and death kings, there was actually a spectator watching from afar. This spectator was a woman, a beautiful young woman like an enchantress. When 9 Underworld Demon King and the other demons were chasing after Yi Chen, this beautiful young woman and Azure Sky Sword Emperor followed the aura of the demons and rushed over. Naturally, this beautiful young woman was also a titled monarch. Although the last titled monarch who left his mark on Emperor Scar Steely is not his main body, he is still so powerful. That 3-flower Dao borrowing and primordial spirit lock can be considered one of the most powerful secret arts since ancient times. The beautiful young lady sighed, "I really want to have a battle with him to verify my achievements. Unfortunately, he no longer has any battle strength left." Nirvana Demon Emperor, the damage to your soul this time will probably cause you to be in hibernation for 10 years, unless you have some powerful treasure. The beautiful young woman did not take advantage of the situation. Titled monarchs rarely did things like harming others without benefiting themselves. Moreover, she did not have 100% assurance in killing Yi Chen. Since she could not kill him, why would she offend a genius with boundless prospects in the future? A yellow light flickered, and the beautiful young woman disappeared into the starry sky. Gone. Yi Chen let out a sigh of relief. Gone. Yuan Emperor glanced at the depths of the starry sky. When he used 3-flower Dao borrowing, his soul power had sharply increased, allowing him to sense that someone was spying on him from the side. If he were at his peak, he would have naturally pulled this person out. However, at that time, he was fighting Nirvana Demon Emperor, so it was better to pretend to be deaf and mute, lest it bring unpredictable dangers to Yi Chen. Yi Chen being able to sense the beautiful young woman did not make Yuan Emperor feel strange. Yi Chen possessed soul eyes. In this world, there was probably no one who could hide from him. Since she left, she should not be an enemy. In Eternal Sky Sect, Li Zhongfeng and the others raised their heads in anticipation. The wait didn't last long. After a while, Yi Chen's figure appeared in the square. "Elder Yi, what about the Nirvana Demon Emperor?" Li Zhongfeng asked anxiously. "The crisis has been temporarily resolved." Yi Chen didn't explain much. Li Changfeng saw that Yi Chen didn't explain the reason for Nirvana Demon Emperor's retreat, so he didn't ask. "Sect leader, can I have a look at the Savage Stone?" Yi Chen suddenly said. "Lover's Stone? All right." Without hesitation, Li Zhongfeng took out the couple stone from his storage ring and handed it over to Yi Chen. He was absolutely unwilling to give the Savage Stone to Nirvana Demon Emperor and the others, but he was willing to give it to Yi Chen, even if Yi Chen did not return it to him. Bringing along the Savage Stone, Yi Chen returned to the mountain peak hall that he owned in the Changtian sect. He planned to let Yuan Emperor determine whether or not this was the Savage Stone and what use it had. In the palace, Yi Chen lifted up the Savage Stone and studied it carefully. The Savage Stone was made of jade, with light flowing inside. It looked like a pair of mandarin ducks. However, Yi Chen's eyes were much more powerful than before. He could tell that this pair of mandarin ducks was not naturally formed, but had been modified by someone with a special method. It was just that Li Zhongfeng couldn't tell with his eyes. Opening the mountain view painting, Yuan Emperor walked out. Yi Chen asked, "Senior, is this really the Savage Stone?" Yuan Emperor's body was very vague, and he couldn't hold anything. He looked at it and said slowly, "It is indeed the Savage Stone. Unfortunately, there is no more savage power inside." "No more savage power? What do you mean?" "Without it, this Savage Stone is completely worthless. It can only be used as a collection. Otherwise, the owner of the Savage Stone would not have modified it and made a pair of mandarin ducks." Completely worthless. Yi Chen forced a smile. For a worthless Savage Stone, the Great Destruction Demon Emperor and the other Life and Death Realm warriors had almost destroyed the Zhongtian martial school. He had to admit that the Zhongtian martial school had been wronged, and so had he. "What is the use of this Savage Stone?" Yi Chen asked again. Yuan Emperor explained, "The Savage Stone is extremely useful for the Life and Death Realm warriors of the True Spirit continent, because it is the key to finding and entering the Savage Star. Back in the day, I had also obtained a Savage Star. If it were not for the fact that you need a Savage Stone to enter the Savage Star, I would be able to show you the way to the starry sky." Savage Star. The moment Yi Chen heard this name, he knew that it was not normal. In the ancient era, the Savage Mountain was not damaged, and there were countless treasures. But a disaster fell from the sky. A sky sword came from the sky and split the True Spirit continent into 3 parts, forming the True Spirit continent, the Blood Sky continent, and the Sky Sword continent. Naturally, the Savage Mountain was also split apart. Then, the Elysium suffered from the alien race's war, and the Savage Mountain was almost completely destroyed. Only some of the mountain's edges remained. On the other hand, the Savage Star has an even more ancient savage power than the Savage Mountain. Over there, one would be able to feel the profound of the world more vividly, and learn the profound faster. Besides that, because the Savage Star is a savage world, there are all kinds of treasures that might not even be seen in 100,000, or even 10,000 years. If one has the chance to enter the Savage Star, one's power would definitely increase drastically. If you get a Savage Stone, you have to go to the Savage Star. Only by increasing your power and protecting yourself will you have a better chance of fighting against the alien race. "Senior, where can I get a Savage Stone?" Hearing Yuan Emperor's words, Yi Chen finally understood the importance of the Savage Stone. It was a stone that could increase one's power by a lot, so it could not be ignored. The Savage Stone is formed by the Savage power, and would only appear in the Savage Mountain. But, right now, the amount of Savage Stones produced in the Savage Mountain has decreased drastically. I am afraid that under normal circumstances, it would be hard to find one. "Oh right, does the Savage Ancient Place in the Sky Martial region still exist?" Yuan Emperor asked. Yi Chen said, "The Savage Ancient Place still exists." He had been there with Yang Fengfeng and the rest before. "Alright, the Savage Ancient Place still has a lot of savage power. Once you enter, the chance of finding a Savage Stone should be a bit higher. Of course, some of the King-grade forbidden places also have a lot of savage mountain ranges, and there might be Savage Stones there. But, things like opportunities. You might not be able to find them even if you search for 100 years. Indeed. Yi Chen faintly nodded. The Savage Stone was so important, but it was too hard to find it. Even the Great Destruction Demon Emperor had come to fight for it. It could be seen that even titled monarchs wanted a piece of Savage Stone. Yuan Emperor reminded Yi Chen one last time, although the Savage Star has a lot of opportunities, it is not a good place either. It is very dangerous. Without the power of 5-star, It is best not to go there, even if there is a savage stone. As someone who had entered the Savage Star before, Yuan Emperor had the most right to speak. That place was full of opportunities and dangers. It was a treasure land, but also a dangerous land. This savage stone did not have much use for Yi Chen, so Yi Chen returned it to Li Zhongfeng. On the second day, Yi Chen left his consciousness projection and rushed toward the true spirit continent. Days passed by. Through the Yi family's 99 Yuan return Great Formation, Yi Chen had already recovered the Jin Yuan that he had lost during the battle, and he had also made some progress. Blood Skyland, Terminator Demon Martial School, Nirvana Demon Emperor had been in seclusion for half a month, and there had been no news. Demon King was extremely anxious, guarding the Terminator Demon Martial School without going out. Yi Chen, this brat, he has caused so much trouble for the leader. I will definitely take revenge in the future. I wonder how the leader is doing right now, and if he is in danger. Demon King walked back and forth. Suddenly, the space twisted, and Nirvana Demon Emperor came out. Leader. Demon King went up to greet him. Nirvana Demon Emperor's face was very pale, and his aura was a bit chaotic. It was a sign that his soul power had been injured, and he could not control his powerful cultivation. Waving his hand, Nirvana Demon Emperor was not in a good mood. He said, Zhongtian Martial School's Savage Stone, I must get it. That Yuan Emperor used the 3 flowers borrowing technique, so his power must have been greatly reduced. He might not even have the power to fight anymore. You go and inform Granny Xian and Bloodshark King. With the 3 of you, you can easily stop Yi Chen and get the Savage Stone. Yes. Demon King hesitated for a moment, then agreed. He also felt that it was impossible for Yuan Emperor to be safe. As for Yi Chen, he could at most contend with Granny Xian. With Bloodshark King and himself, one Yi Chen was nothing to worry about. Boom. At this moment, the sky above Terminator Demon's sect suddenly blossomed with an intense black light. For a moment, the heaven and earth shook, and the heaven and earth Yuan Qi became extremely chaotic. This was a sign that someone was attacking the Terminator Demon sect's formation. Outside the formation, the Devil Flower Empress, who was dressed in a gorgeous robe, had a solemn expression on her face. She slowly retracted her jade-like palm, and in front of her, a huge handprint appeared on the black metal barrier. It was covered in cracks. Demon Flower Emperor, how dare you? Because Nirvana Demon Emperor's soul was severely injured, his perception was greatly reduced. Through the formation, he saw Demon Flower Emperor, and he couldn't help but grit his teeth in anger. Demon Flower Emperor didn't say a word, and her palm landed on the metal barrier again. Boom. This time, a large part of the metal barrier caved in, and it almost collapsed. Underneath the formation, numerous spirit veins spewed out endless spirit stone Yuan Qi, strengthening the formation. Demon King even personally controlled the formation core, stabilizing the formation. Demon Flower Emperor, you dare to be impudent in my Terminator Demon sect. I swear that I will destroy your Chaos Demon Sea lineage and humiliate you in every possible way. Nirvana Demon Emperor had never experienced such a humiliating situation. As one of the few titled monarchs, he was actually attacked and humiliated in front of his sect. People of the Devil Dao couldn't bear to be humiliated. With his soul injured, Nirvana Demon Emperor's killing intent became even more intense. Creak, creak. Before the first wave subsided, another wave rose. On the other side of the formation, a terrifying explosion sounded out as well. A white-clothed female stood in the air, and icy white spatial gates continuously formed, attacking the formation. These spatial gates contained the power of space, and their effects were much better than the Devil Flower Emperor's palm power. In a few blinks of an eye, a complete space gate gradually appeared on the Terminator Demon sect's formation. Once the space gate was imprinted, one could easily enter. Xianhu, you came too? Are you crazy? Ah, you dare to humiliate me like this? Nirvana Demon Emperor was about to go crazy, and his eyes were blood red. Chapter 938. Other than the Sky Sword Continent's titled monarchs, the titled monarchs that were familiar with Shu King, Air Emperor, Black Dragon Old Ancestor, and others were of the same level. Their battle prowess was at the 5-star realm. The Demon Flower Emperor had always kept a low profile. She wasn't as famous as Shu King and Air Emperor. However, it was rumored that her battle prowess wasn't any weaker than Shu King and Air Emperor. The unknown was always terrifying. Therefore, no one dared to provoke the Demon Flower Emperor. Although the Nirvana Demon Emperor had always been conceited, he wouldn't provoke her. Therefore, when the Devil Flower Sovereign attacked the Grand Array of the Terminator Demon sect, although the Terminator Demon Emperor was furious, he would at most curse a few words to show off his eloquence. In reality, after the battle, he most likely wouldn't dare to truly exterminate the chaotic Demon Sea and humiliate the Devil Flower Sovereign. It was already good enough that others didn't find trouble with him. Xianhu had only become a titled monarch a few years ago. Among the titled monarchs, she was considered a junior. Her strength was at the 5-star realm at most. 90% of her strength was at the 5-star realm. When Xianhu attacked the Nirvana Demon sect's grand formation, the Nirvana Demon Emperor felt greatly humiliated. He lost control of himself and his eyes turned bloodshot. If not for the fact that his soul was heavily injured and his strength wasn't even at 70 to 80% of his peak, the Nirvana Demon Emperor definitely wouldn't let Xianhu go. They would definitely fight to the death. But now, he was powerless even though he wanted to. This was what he hated the most. Yi Chen, Xianhu, I won't forgive you. At this moment, the Nirvana Demon Emperor hated Yi Chen to the bone. If it wasn't for Yi Chen summoning Yuan Emperor's clone, he wouldn't be in such a miserable state. In a word, the Nirvana Demon Emperor was on the verge of chi deviation. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't put the blame on Yi Chen. After all, he was the one who provoked the Yuan Emperor and even boasted that he would kill the latter. Of course, even if the Nirvana Demon Emperor didn't lose control, he still wouldn't let Yi Chen go. It was just that his mentality was different. The former would vent his anger on Yi Chen, while the latter wouldn't let the matter go. The Nirvana Demon Emperor still didn't know his current situation. Soul injuries didn't only affect one's strength, but also one's mentality and attitude. This was also the reason why, after reaching life and death realm, one's soul achievement could not be too high, but it could not be too low. Yi Chen could be said to be blessed by heaven. His soul was 10 times that of ordinary life and death kings. His innate advantage far surpassed others. If he were the Nirvana Demon Emperor, not only would his battle strength not be affected, he wouldn't lose control either. If not for his strength not reaching the level of titled monarchs, ordinary titled monarchs wouldn't be his match. Sect leader, I can't hold on much longer. Demon King's forehead was covered in sweat. 2 titled monarchs had joined hands to attack Terminator Demon Sect's Great Array. Being able to control the Great Array and resist until now was already not an easy task. After all, Terminator Demon Sect's Great Array was not an invincible Great Array. Under the heavens, Shu King's Great Array was the most powerful. Otherwise, why would Shu King's Great Array be a 4th grade sect when he was also a titled monarch? Although it was the weakest among 4th grade sects, it wasn't something a 5th grade sect could compare with. Activate Never-Ending Demon Sob Array. Hold on for as long as you can. The Nirvana Demon Emperor finally had some rationality left. He spoke word by word, his voice filled with hatred. Never-Ending Demon Sob Array. Demon King stared blankly. Never-Ending Demon Sob Array was Terminator Demon Sect's trump card. Just like Yi Clan's Immortal Sword Chi Great Array, it was a peak mid-supreme grade array. Its requirements and quantity of spirit veins were extremely high. Once it was activated, it would inevitably damage the numerous spirit veins of Terminator Demon Sect. This was because the quality and quantity of spirit veins of Terminator Demon Sect couldn't keep up. Hurry up and activate it. The Nirvana Demon Emperor roared. Yes. Demon King sucked in a deep breath. Forming a seal with his palm, he pressed it on the mountain peak. Woo! 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 A wave of ghostly wails and wolf howls soared into the sky. The sky within 10,000 li suddenly darkened. Grey-black chi streams continuously surged, faintly forming frightening faces. Everyone, listen up. Control the never-ending Demon Sob Array and attack the enemy. Demon King roared with a hoarse voice. The elders and disciples of Terminator Demon's sect had long since been alarmed by this change. Hearing Demon King's command, the late sea of Soul Realm elders and disciples stood at the designated control points of the never-ending demon sob array and poured their Jin Yuan into the great array. Then, they roared and used the power of the array to attack Demon Flower Emperor and Shenhu. Rumble. Rumble. Grey-black ghost faces appeared one after another, opening their huge mouths and biting toward the two attacking the array. Demon Flower Emperor coldly snorted and casually waved her palm. A large number of ghost faces exploded, and the grey-black chi streams were completely annihilated. Not to mention attacking her, even approaching her was difficult. Of course, the frequency at which she attacked Terminator Demon Sect's great array also decreased because of this. As for Shenhu, the moment the ghost faces got within 3,000 zhong of her, they would immediately disappear, as if they had been teleported somewhere else. Inside the great array, Nirvana Demon Emperor clenched his teeth and suddenly sat down cross-legged. Buzz. Outside his forehead, an illusory winged insect appeared. This was a soul insect condensed from soul power. It was a soul support secret art that Terminator Demon Sect had obtained from an ancient ruin. Its grade was very low, only at the low heaven grade. However, it was very useful, allowing him to transmit messages to others. Swish. The soul insect wasn't restricted by the array, and it directly entered the void, disappearing without a trace. Where are you going? Outside the formation, Xuanho's eyes flashed with a strange light. A small space door appeared between her brows, and she also entered the void. In the void, in front of the soul insect, the space door welcomed it. The soul insect was sucked in, and when it appeared again, it was in front of Shenhu. Pa. The soul insect exploded, but it was a message for help. Shenhu. Nirvana Demon Emperor gritted his teeth, and another soul insect appeared between his brows. Right now, his soul was heavily injured, and using the secret art of the soul without permission was a huge burden. However, he couldn't care less. These two crazy women clearly wanted to see him in trouble. If he didn't ask for help, with his current strength, he wouldn't be able to resist them at all. Even if he could escape, his battle strength would fall to a new low. At that time, he didn't know how long it would take for him to recover. A large number of soul insects escaped into the void from all directions. Seeing this, Xuanho's space door, which was driven by soul power, expanded to the limit, and at least half of the soul insects were sucked in. The Demon Flower Emperor's attainments in the soul and space profound weren't as good as Xuanho's, but she also had a soul attack secret art. Her eyes flashed with a red light, and countless black flowers spread out. Each black flower wrapped around a soul insect, easily annihilating it. Unfortunately, 3 soul insects still escaped, and in the blink of an eye, they disappeared without a trace. Demon Flower Emperor, finish this quickly, Shenhu said to the Demon Flower Emperor. Okay. The Demon Flower Emperor nodded her head. This time, they naturally came to stand up for Yi Chen. Needless to say, Shenhu had always been on the same side as Yi Chen. The Demon Flower Emperor's disciple was Murong Qingcheng, and she had said that she was willing to use the strength of her clan to exchange for Yi Chen's care for the demonic human clan. These words weren't said casually. If one didn't put in effort, how would there be any return? Yi Chen already had the strength that a titled monarch couldn't kill. In the future, his achievements would definitely be limitless. If she didn't grasp this opportunity, there wouldn't be another chance. This was a good opportunity. Devil absorption, the Demon Flower Emperor shouted, and her hands changed seals. An illusory black devil flower slowly condensed. This was a devil flower that came from the devil world, and it had the ability to absorb energy and convert it into devil energy. She wanted to use the devil flower's ability to absorb the Terminator Demon Sect's Grand Formation's energy. Profound 10,000-layer door, sky-stealing Sunday Empress Shen also unleashed an incredibly powerful and profound technique. She blocked the spatial doors one after another, completely surrounding the Terminator Demon Sect. Any ghost face that appeared would be devoured immediately. Whoosh! The devil flower in the Demon Flower Emperor's hand had already condensed to the size of a mountain. With a wave of her hand, The devil flower covered the entire Terminator demon sect's grand formation, and its roots dug into the soil outside the formation. In an instant, the entire Terminator demon sect couldn't be seen anymore. If it wasn't for the protection of the formation, the Terminator demon sect would have already been destroyed. Fart. The Demon Sea King vomited a mouthful of blood, and his face was pale. Sect Master, the formation's energy is quickly dissipating. Some of the mid-grade spirit veins have already used up their spiritual energy. The Demon Flower Emperor's strength deeply shocked him. She wanted to absorb the entire formation's energy with her own strength. What kind of method was needed to achieve this? The Battle Sky Elephant Emperor has received my message. He's here. The Nirvana Demon Emperor had already calmed down, and said coldly. The Battle Sky Elephant Emperor? Alright, my Terminator demon sect is saved. The Demon Sea King heaved a sigh of relief when he heard the Battle Sky Elephant Emperor's name. The Battle Sky Elephant Emperor wasn't any weaker than the Shu King's Air Emperor. Among the titled monarchs, he was invincible in close combat. He had his own merits, just like the Black Dragon ancestor. The Devil Flower could absorb energy, and as for the absorbed energy, it naturally gathered on the Demon Flower Emperor's body. In her left hand, a ball of devil energy was growing larger and larger. The devil energy contained within it wasn't much lower than the Demon Flower Emperor's own cultivation. If it wasn't for the fact that this devil energy wasn't pure and had to be tempered countless times before it could be converted into cultivation, and if it wasn't for the fact that her mental state already contained too much devil energy and couldn't continue increasing her cultivation, this ball of devil energy would have completely increased her cultivation. Go. With a wave of her right hand, the devil flower flew into the sky, and her left hand sent out a black sun-like devil energy ball. Its target was the Terminator demon sect's grand formation. Rumble. A world-shaking explosion erupted. With the Terminator demon sect as the center, everything within several 100,000 li was enveloped by the intense light, making it impossible to see anything with the naked eye. Meanwhile, the mountains within 10,000 li were instantly razed to the ground by the black shockwave. The powerful airflow even tore apart the two heavens above, shooting straight into the starry sky and causing a small star to fall. The grand formations of the Terminator demon sect were naturally annihilated without a trace. All the elders and disciples maintaining the formations vomited blood and fainted on the ground. Terminator Demon Emperor, we didn't come to annihilate the sect. We came to find you. Demon Flower Emperor and Xianhu indeed didn't come to annihilate the Terminator demon sect. Under normal circumstances, Life and Death Kings rarely did something like annihilating a sect. After all, everyone had their own forces. Today, you annihilate my sect, and tomorrow, I'll annihilate your sect. How could they survive? Therefore, the annihilation of a sect wasn't something that could be done easily. This was a double-edged sword. Terminator Demon Emperor hid in the profound Origin Tower and said coldly, "You've lost your only chance. Battle Sky Elephant Emperor is here." As soon as he finished speaking, an elephant's trumpet resounded from afar. Just by hearing the sound, the two of them could sense that a desolate giant mammoth was rushing over. This desolate giant mammoth's trunk was thousands of miles long, and its aura was tyrannical and invincible. The entire world was trembling because of its aura. Any demonic beast that sensed this aura would prostrate themselves on the ground, their eyes filled with fear. Chapter 939. So what if Sky Elephant Emperor is here? The Demon Flower Emperor pressed down with his right hand, and the mountain-like demon flower shrank down, trying to wrap around the Shenyuan Tower where Nirvana Demon Emperor was. Whoosh! The demon flower was extremely strange, and Nirvana Demon Emperor naturally wouldn't let the Shenyuan Tower be wrapped up. Activating his demonic Shenyuan, the Shenyuan Tower turned into a tricolored light and flew out. Space shift. Xuanho's methods were shocking. Although her battle strength wasn't as strong as the Demon Flower Emperor's, she was above the Demon Flower Emperor in other aspects. Forming seals with both hands, she shot out seals at the flying Shenyuan Tower. No matter how the Shenyuan Tower tried to dodge, it couldn't avoid being hit by the seals. With a blur, the Shenyuan Tower inexplicably appeared between the Demon Flower Emperor and Xianhu. Whoosh! The demon flower wrapped around the Shenyuan Tower, and countless roots and vines tried to take root in the Shenyuan Tower, which made the Nirvana Demon Emperor's eyes pop out. Triple Radiance Treasure. The Shenyuan Tower was not an ordinary supreme rank artifact. As the Nirvana Demon Emperor poured in more demonic Shenyuan, the Shenyuan Tower's surface blossomed with a dazzling tricolored light. The tricolored light shook, and the demon flower cracked in countless places, splashing juices everywhere. However, a scene that made him furious happened. The demon flower had an extremely powerful self-recovery ability, and the cracks healed in the blink of an eye. The splashing juices splashed on the Shenyuan Tower, making the tricolored light on the tower's surface dim a lot. It was as if this juices had the effect of corroding Shenyuan and could not be contaminated. Demon Flower Emperor, Xian Hu, stop. From afar, a huge man broke through the void and arrived. Both of them ignored the giant man. An invisible Mitsubishi mark appeared between Xuanho's eyebrows. It passed through the demon flower and the mystic tower and landed in the Nirvana Demon Emperor's Sea of Soul. The Nirvana Demon Emperor had long since been prepared for the two of them to use their soul force to attack him, so he immediately executed a soul defense secret technique to protect his soul sea. The three diamond seals collided with the layers of soul barriers and continuously attacked. However, the Nirvana Demon Emperor's soul had been heavily injured after all, so how could he withstand the attacks of the three diamond seals? The soul barriers were broken layer by layer, and in the end, the three diamond seals, which had become much more illusory, were branded into the Nirvana Demon Emperor's soul sea. After Yuan Emperor, Nirvana Demon Emperor was injured once again. It was different from Yuan Emperor's primordial spirit kill. Primordial spirit kill was exceptionally damaging to the soul. However, Xuanho's Mitsubishi mark didn't seem to do much damage to the soul, but it was imprinted on it and couldn't be removed. This was clearly a soul attack secret technique that could continuously damage the soul. Xianhu, I told you to stop. The giant man was very angry. He threw a punch from far away. This punch was ferocious and overbearing, as if it could split the heaven and earth. It rushed out and filled the entire world. Mysterious myriad layers gate. Xianhu didn't dare to be careless. With a wave of her right hand, many space gates appeared in front of her. Originally, the distance between her and the giant man was only tens of thousands of li, but as the space gates continued to appear, the distance between them seemed to be millions of li, and the space was stretched further and further. Boom 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 boom. Countless explosions rang out as the giant man's fist energy destroyed a large area of the space gate. When it was about to collapse, a huge phantom of a war elephant appeared, and with a sweep of its trunk, it destroyed the remaining space gate. Only then did it finally collapse, leaving only the faint trumpeting of the war elephant. Such a powerful fist energy. Xianhu was pushed back dozens of li hu. When Xianhu was pushed back, the giant man finally appeared beside the Shenyuan pagoda. As soon as he appeared, a heavy feeling covered a radius of thousands of li. It was as if he wasn't a human, but a huge mountain, a heaven-supporting beast. Anyone standing in front of him would feel insignificant as a speck of dust. Demon Flower Emperor, stop. The huge man stretched out his hand and grabbed the devil flower's stem. The devil flower took advantage of this and spread towards the huge man's arm. It seemed like it wanted to cover his entire body. However, the huge man's body emitted powerful energy fluctuations, and the devil flower was sent flying, disintegrating in the air. The demon flower emperor didn't attack again. He said to the giant man, Zhong Tianxiang Emperor, do you want to help him? Zhong Tianxiang Emperor was the sect leader of the Battle Elephant sect. He mainly cultivated the physical body, and his strength was terrifying. Although his immortal body was only at the peak of the flesh derivation realm, his body's defense was terrifyingly strong. Monarchs of the same level would find it difficult to break through his body's defense and truly hurt him. Therefore, even if he didn't comprehend many profound meanings and wasn't very profound, he was still extremely difficult to deal with. Zhong Tianxiang Emperor didn't answer directly. He said coldly, "This is the Blood Sky continent. It's not a place where you can come and go as you please. Today, if you don't leave an explanation, don't think about leaving easily." What? Do you think you can keep the two of us here? The Demon Flower Emperor didn't take Zhong Tianxiang Emperor's words seriously and mocked. What if you add me? Another person rushed over from afar. He wore a black robe and had blue hair. He was about 40 years old, and the aura he emitted was as vast as the sea. He was only a little weaker than Zhong Tianxiang Emperor. Nine-headed Snake Emperor. Xian Hu recognized the other party's identity. Nine-headed Snake Emperor was the leader of the nine-headed snake family, the most powerful figure of the half-beast race. His battle strength was mid-5-star, the same as Dragon King. There's still us. Granny Shen, Blood Shark King, Silver Leopard King, Iron Hoof Beast King, Mantis Queen, and other Life and Death Kings flew over from time to time. These Life and Death Kings had at least 3-star battle strength. In a one-on-one battle, these Life and Death Kings with below 5-star battle strength were naturally not enough to kill. However, with two titled monarchs holding back Demon Flower Emperor and Xian Hu, they would be able to play a huge role in the battle. Back then, Dragon King and Xian Hu had joined hands to hunt down 9 Underworld Demon King. At that time, Xian Hu was only a peak king, but she was still able to injure 9 Underworld Demon King. After all, the defense of titled monarchs had not reached the level where they could ignore peak kings. Taking a step back, even if peak kings could not break through one's defense, they would still be able to consume one's Jinyuan. Only body-refining kings like Sky Elephant Emperor would not be afraid of being surrounded. Demon Flower Emperor sighed and said to Xian Hu, "Our goal has been achieved. It's time to go." Actually, they did not plan to kill Nirvana Demon Emperor this time. After all, this was Blood Sky Continent, the territory of others. They could not cover the sky with one hand. Their goal was simple, which was to heavily injure Nirvana Demon Emperor and tell the world that messing with Yi Chen was the same as messing with them. Yeah, it's time to go. Xian Hu faintly nodded. The spatial door opened, and Xian Hu stepped inside. Shortly after, the door closed and disappeared into the void. Puff. On the other side, Demon Flower Emperor's body turned into countless black flowers that exploded and disappeared. Sky Elephant Emperor and Nine-Headed Serpent Emperor had ugly expressions on their faces. They knew that they could not make Demon Flower Emperor and Xian Hu stay. Therefore, they could only watch as they left. Their previous words were just for show. If Nirvana Demon Emperor was not seriously injured and covered them with his Nirvana realm, they would not be able to leave so easily. Sky Elephant Emperor and Nine-Headed Serpent Emperor were far inferior to Nirvana Demon Emperor in terms of martial arts. Demonic beasts and half-beasts could rarely comprehend realms. They could not compare to humans, which was their biggest weakness. Chapter 940. We are not good at martial arts, but if we have an extreme rank realm artifact, why would we need to rely on others? The Nine-Headed Serpent Emperor was also annoyed. The Demon Flower Emperor and Xian Hu were slapping the kings of the Blood Sky Continent in the face, coming and going as they pleased. What was worse was that they could not do anything about it. After all, the Demon Flower Emperor was not weaker than the Zhongtian Elephant Emperor. Although she also did not have a realm, keeping her here would be extremely difficult. Moreover, Xuanhou Space Profound was the most mysterious and contained a mysterious Dao. Keeping her here would be even more difficult than keeping the Demon Flower Emperor. The two felt their own weaknesses and decided to take some risks to enter the first king-level forbidden zone of the Blood Sky Continent. It was said that there was a realm artifact inside, and as long as they could get one, they would be able to make up for their weaknesses. Destruction Demon Emperor, how are you? The Zhongtian Elephant Emperor turned around and looked at the tall Shenyuan Tower. The Void Destruction Demon Emperor was in an extremely miserable state. His soul was injured again and again, and half of the demonic qi attached to the Shenyuan Tower had been absorbed by the demon flower. At this moment, his strength had dropped by a large margin. Not to mention 5-star battle prowess, even 4-star battle prowess was barely enough for him. In other words, without the Shenyuan Tower, most of the Peak Kings could easily kill the Void Destruction Demon Emperor. I won't die yet. The Destruction Demon Emperor walked out of the Shenyuan Tower in a sorry state. How did you fight against that Yi Chen? The Nine-Headed Serpent Emperor was a bit confused. He still did not know about the Savage Stone. Taking a deep breath, the Great Destruction Monarch was about to reveal the truth as he said, "You too might not know this, but the sect leader of the Eternal Sky Sect, Li Zhongfeng, has a Savage Rock in his possession. This Savage Rock was given to him by the Battle Emperor. As long as you can obtain the Savage Rock, you'll be able to find the Savage Star and enter it." He did not know how long it would take for his strength to recover. In the meantime, he would need to rely on the two kings of the Bloodsky continent. Of course, he would also try his best to find treasures that could help him recover. Elysium was vast, and he believed that if he paid the price, he would be able to get something. Savage Stone. The nine-headed serpent emperor let out a bitter laugh and said, "That Savage Stone is useless." "It's useless? What do you mean?" Nirvana Demon Emperor asked. The nine-headed serpent emperor said, "In the past, I saw the Battle King enter the Desolate Star with my own eyes, and a Savage Stone can only be used to enter the Desolate Star once. Otherwise, he wouldn't have left the Savage Stone intact. I didn't tell anyone about this, and you weren't in this world at that time. The War King was a figure from 500 years ago, while the Nirvana Demon Emperor was only 300 years old. Impossible." Nirvana Demon Emperor cried out. "Nirvana Demon Emperor, the nine-headed Snake Emperor has no reason to lie to you. As for this Savage Stone, we are also looking for it. If the Eternal Sky Sect really has it, how could we let it go? Xianhu and the Demon Flower Emperor can't stop us." The Zhongtian Elephant Emperor added. After chatting for a while, the Zhongtian Elephant Emperor and the nine-headed Serpent Emperor both left. The Nirvana Demon Emperor clenched his fists tightly, his face sullen. Among the Life and Death Kings, there was a lone king called Tujiao King. He wasn't famous, and he didn't have many friends, almost none. This was because he was too eccentric and didn't understand the ways of the world. Because of a small matter, he had a falling out with a high-rank king friend. Tujiao King looked at the Nirvana Demon Emperor coldly and thought to himself, "The Nirvana Demon Emperor's soul has been severely damaged, and he only has 30% of his battle power left. This is very suitable for the Master's plan. Why don't we lure him into the underground demon cave?" No one knew that a vicious plot against the Nirvana Demon Emperor had been born. The news of the Demon Flower Emperor and Xianhu attacking the Nirvana Demon sect spread like wildfire. After Yi Chen heard the news, he couldn't help but smile bitterly, but he also felt a bit touched. Spirit Cloud Peak, Yi family's sacred ground. In recent days, Yi Chen had been training his sword on the Spirit Cloud Peak. In the center of the peak, there was a 100-meter-tall fiery red tree with a canopy of 1 li. On its branches, a young man and a young girl were picking fruits. In the entire Yi family, besides Yi Tianhao, Shen Yuqing, and Yi Chen's younger siblings, no one could approach the fire pear tree, because Yi Chen had set up a restriction around it. So sweet. Yi Xiaoxiao took a bite of the fiery red crystal-like fire pear and sat on the branch, watching Yi Chen train his sword. Yi Chen's sword art was very ordinary. It didn't contain any zhenyuan or sword intent, and it didn't even produce any sword wind. It looked like an ordinary person without a trace of zhenyuan was training his sword art. Strange, what is Big Brother doing? This is called sword training? Yi Xiaoxiao asked. Yi Xian's talent in sword Dao was much higher than Yi Xiaoxiao's. He frowned and said, "Xiaoxiao, have you noticed that Big Brother's sword art looks very ordinary, but if you put yourself in his shoes and become Big Brother's opponent, I won't be able to block any of Big Brother's sword moves. Every sword move is a sure-kill sword." Really? After hearing Yi Xian's words, Yi Xiaoxiao did as he said out of curiosity. "It's true." After a long time, Yi Xiaoxiao said in surprise. Yi Chen's sword was ordinary, but it seemed to be able to ignore space. No matter from any direction or angle, it could be a sure-kill sword that couldn't be dodged or avoided. At this moment, Yi Chen was immersed in the understanding of space profound. His sword art indeed didn't contain quintessential essence or sword intent, but it contained space profound. Space profound was mysterious and didn't have any fancy moves. It went straight to the essence and materialized. Sword after sword was swung out. Yi Chen's sword art became more and more accurate. It was getting closer and closer to the ripples of space, giving off a feeling of turning something rotten into something magical. After an unknown period of time, Yi Chen's mind was enlightened and he suddenly slashed out with his sword. Poof! The place where Yi Chen trained his sword art was a messy stone array. Countless huge rocks were placed in front of him. When he waved out his sword, the huge rocks in front of him were not damaged at all, but the rocks behind him were cut in half. Orbital slash is finally done. Starting from the creation of the second style of the heaven-splitting sword art, orbital slash, it took several months for Yi Chen to finally perfect the orbital slash. Now, as long as he was highly focused, he could instantly release the power of the orbital slash, reaching the realm of seamless penetration. In other words, under the orbital slash, any energy defense would be nothing. This was because the orbital slash could completely follow the ripples of space, ignoring the energy defense and directly affect the opponent's body. The orbital slash was like a teleportation sword art. It didn't need any process. Hey, you two kids, don't eat too much. Be careful, your bodies might not be able to handle it. Turning his head, Yi Chen reminded Yi Xian and Yi Xiaoxiao, who were feasting. Feeling that he had too many shortcomings, Yi Chen finally decided to make a trip to Sky Sword Continent. The sword realm of Sky Sword Continent could help him reach the next level, raising his sword domain from the peak of the second layer to the third layer. Only after reaching the third layer could he be considered to have truly entered the next level. Sky Sword Continent was located in the north of True Spirit Continent, separated by hundreds of millions of li of North Sea. North Sea's weather was temperamental, and the void also seemed to be extremely unstable. Space storms would appear from time to time, causing Yi Chen's speed to drop again and again. After rushing for a while, Yi Chen suddenly stopped and reached out his hand to grab a clump of spatial power. What a mysterious sword chi! Yi Chen finally understood why the closer he got to Sky Sword Continent, the more frequent the space storms appeared. In Sky Sword Continent, there existed powerful sword chi. These sword chi could disturb the void and slice the yin and yang. Although they wouldn't display any great might, they could change the environment in minute details. Sky Sword, I wonder what kind of sword you are. A curious look flickered in his eyes as Yi Chen continued on his way. After spending several days, Yi Chen finally arrived at Sky Sword Continent. On the shoreline, Yi Chen's figure appeared. As soon as he appeared, he felt that the Sword Dao civilization here was too flourishing. Closing his eyes, he felt as if he could see countless sword chi soaring into the sky. These sword chi converged together, causing the clouds in the sky to be unable to exist. The bright and clear sky was completely unobstructed. More than half of the people in a continent cultivate sword arts. This isn't just tens of thousands or millions of people, but billions or even tens of billions of people. Yi Chen sighed inwardly. Without entering the void, Yi Chen directly flew in the sky, taking the chance to understand the customs of Sky Sword Continent. Clang clang clang. Along the way, Yi Chen saw sword artists battling from time to time. There were fancy sword arts, simple and unadorned sword arts, callous and emotionless sword arts, and sinister sword arts. Perhaps because of the Sky Sword, the sword artists of Sky Sword Continent had higher aptitudes than those of True Spirit Continent. Some young sword artists already had the bearing of a generation's experts. Hey, isn't that Yi Chen? He looks exactly the same as in the portrait. Because he was flying in the sky, Yi Chen's figure was seen by some powerful sword artists. Yi Chen's fame was not only spread in True Spirit Continent. In Sky Sword Continent, Yi Chen's fame was not inferior in the slightest. This was because Sky Sword Continent mainly cultivated sword arts, and Yi Chen's sword arts realm would make him a first-rate peerless genius even in Sky Sword Continent. This made the sword artists of Sky Sword Continent extremely unconvinced and curious. Yi Chen has arrived at Sky Sword Continent. The spread of news was inconceivably fast. Of course, those who knew were all high-level sword artists. What is Yi Chen doing in Sky Sword Continent? Don't tell me he's going to the Sword World. He's definitely here for the Sword World. Let's go take a look at Sky Sword Continent. All of a sudden, some qualified sword artists moved upon hearing the news and gathered at the center of Sky Sword Continent. In the center of the Sky Sword continent, a gigantic sword that pierced through the clouds was stabbed into the ground. The gigantic sword was covered in rust, and the sword hilt was bronze in color. There were also rust stains on it. If it wasn't for the fact that this sword was too huge and was thrown on the road, few people would pick it up. From its appearance, it was not eye-catching at all. The huge sword's outer appearance was not eye-catching. However, sword artists would never look at swords with their naked eyes. The sword chi emitted by this sword was vast and mighty. Anyone standing near this sword would feel infinitely small. Fortunately, the huge sword's sword chi was formless and intangible. It could only shock the senses, and did not have any real killing power. Otherwise, who would dare to approach this huge sword? This huge sword was not some nameless huge sword, but precisely the sky sword that split the continent into three. It came from the outer space, and its history ran through the ancient era and the present. Chapter 941. It's really Yi Chen. Yi Chen is here. The first to arrive were a few life and death sword kings. Of course, besides Sky Sword were some powerful sword artists who didn't know what was going on. They didn't have extravagant hopes of comprehending sword domain, because the birth of sword domain required a heaven-grade martial art as a foundation. However, sword domain could improve their sword arts. The first 6 floors could be passed without sword domain. The 4th floor was a master-grade sword art, the 5th floor was a half-step king-grade sword art, and the 6th floor was equivalent to a peak sword art below life and death realm. Each floor was more difficult than the last, and was quite challenging. Hey! Here's Yi Chen. The arrival of Yi Chen and a few life and death sword kings immediately attracted everyone's attention. A few reacted the fastest and immediately recognized Yi Chen's identity. They had seen Yi Chen's portrait before. Yi Chen has also come to the sword world. This is big news. How many floors do you think he'll reach? Everybody discussed in low voices. Marquis Sword Snow came here a while ago and seemed to have reached the 10th floor, reaching the peak of the first layer. This Yi Chen's sword domain is more or less the same as Marquis Sword Snow's. I reckon he'll also reach the 10th floor. 7th to 10th floors corresponded to the first layer of sword domain. The heavenly sword was protected by an incorporeal barrier. At this moment, the barrier flickered, and an ancient character appeared. 7. Marquis Swordstar has reached the 7th floor. Reaching the 7th floor meant that one had comprehended sword domain, which held great significance. Wood Sword King, it seems like our Sky Sword continent has another person who has comprehended sword domain. A long-bearded sword king among the life and death sword kings said with a smile. Marquis Swordstar's talent in the sword Dao is extraordinary. It's only a matter of time before he comprehends sword domain. A middle-aged sword king carrying a wooden sword on his back said. 8. After a while, another ancient character appeared on the invisible barrier. 8. So shocking. Passing 2 floors and reaching the 8th floor. Everyone was astonished. Back then, when Marquis Sword Snow comprehended sword domain, he could only reach the 7th layer on his first attempt. However, Marquis Swordstar could reach the 8th layer. However, everyone knew that Marquis Swordstar had already become a life and death king. A life and death king who comprehended sword domain should be able to display the full might of sword domain. However, when Marquis Sword Snow comprehended sword domain, he was not even in life and death realm. Look, Marquis Swordstar has reached the 9th floor. Someone called out. This is too ridiculous. The 7th level represented the initial comprehension of the sword domain. The 8th level represented the mastery of the sword domain. The 9th level represented the late stage of the first level, and the 10th level represented the peak of the first level. With his sword domain reaching the late stage of the first layer, Marquis Swordstar's battle prowess had definitely risen by a large margin. Buzz. The 9th layer was already the late stage of the first layer. Soon, the invisible barrier rippled, and a figure walked out. It was Marquis Swordstar. When Marquis Swordstar saw Yi Chen, he froze for a moment before his lips curled up. He had finally comprehended sword domain as well. Moreover, after accumulating so much, he had instantly reached the late stage of the first layer. Congratulations! Yi Chen said to Marquis Swordstar. "You're also going to challenge the Sword World?" Marquis Swordstar originally planned to leave, but now, he wanted to see how many layers Yi Chen could reach. "The name of the Sword World resounds like thunder in my ears, so I naturally want to give it a try." As he spoke, Yi Chen walked toward the invisible barrier and entered it. Inside the invisible barrier was nothing but a light gate. Yi Chen walked toward the light gate, but his body was immediately repelled by a powerful repulsive force. However, his consciousness still rushed in. The first layer of the Sword World. It was a martial stage. On the stage, Yi Chen's consciousness turned from illusory to solid, turning into a unique consciousness projection. He held a sword in his hand, looking nothing special. In front of him, an expressionless swordsman with an aura as powerful as his own appeared. Kai. This swordsman made his move. The sword in his hand trembled, and thousands of sword flowers filled the air, covering Yi Chen. Yi Chen was shocked to discover that, apart from sword arts, this swordsman's cultivation base and sword intent were exactly the same as his. There was no difference at all. Of course, cultivation base and sword intent were only the hardware of a swordsman. Sword arts were the embodiment of lethality. With a flash of golden light, Yi Chen's sword cut open his opponent's body. He only used the ordinary vibrational sword arts, and then, with his precise eyesight, he followed the opponent's flaws and attacked. After passing the first layer, Yi Chen arrived at the second layer. The second layer's opponents became two. Moreover, the sword arts they used were different from the first layers, but their might was more or less the same. Still using the ordinary vibrational sword arts, Yi Chen killed 2 people with 1 slash. The third layer had 4. The fourth layer had 8. The sixth layer had 32. From the first to the sixth layer, there were a total of 63 swordsmen, displaying 63 different sword arts. Every single sword art was not weak. If it were another peak king, they would definitely die under the chaotic swords. Moreover, Yi Chen discovered that in the sword world, Jin Yuan couldn't be released outside. They could only fight with their swords. This was very advantageous for the challengers, because once Jin Yuan could be released outside, the opponent's cultivation base and sword intent would not be weaker than his. If they worked together, no one would be able to pass through the 6th layer. Even the 5th layer would be difficult. After all, defensive artifacts couldn't be used in the sword world. After passing through the 6th layer, Yi Chen arrived at the 7th layer. The number of opponents on the 7th layer had shockingly increased to 100. 100 swordsmen with similar cultivation and sword intent was a very frightening thing. Fortunately, no one could release Jin Yuan outside. They could only injure each other at close range. Without using the sword domain, Yi Chen wanted to test his limits and see if he could pass through the 7th layer without using the sword domain. The battle began. Yi Chen killed 4 swordsmen as soon as he came up. There was no blood, only a bright sword light flickering in the void. 10, 30, 60, 80. By the time he killed 80, Yi Chen was already drenched in sweat. Because everyone could only fight at close range, there were at most a dozen swordsmen who could approach Yi Chen at a time. However, these swordsmen were not afraid of death. After one batch died, another batch would come. The speed at which they were replenished was extremely fast. There was no time for one to react. Often, one would have to deal with new swordsmen when one's old strength was exhausted. If it wasn't for Yi Chen's outstanding sword arts and the fact that he had just comprehended orbit kill, it would be impossible for Yi Chen to kill 80 swordsmen without using the sword domain. And this was almost his limit. 81st. 85th. By the time he killed 85th swordsman, Yi Chen was finally unable to block the attacks of the last 15 swordsmen. He decisively used the sword domain and used the sword laws to distort the trajectory of the swordsman's attacks. Puff 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 puff. With the sword domain protecting his body, it was much easier for him to kill the remaining 15 sword artists without any effort at all, passing through the 7th floor. 8th layer, the number of swordsmen had increased by several times, reaching 300. However, for Yi Chen, there was no difference between 300 and 100 swordsmen. His sword domain had already reached the peak of the 2nd layer. How could 300 swordsmen be enough? After easily passing through the 8th layer, Yi Chen arrived at the 9th layer. Outside, Yi Chen has also reached the 9th layer. I wonder if he will stop at the 9th layer, like Marquis Swordstar. Everyone discussed spiritedly. The discussion didn't last long before the Ancient 10 character flashed on the invisible barrier. 10th layer. This should be your limit. Sword domain is not that easy to raise. Moreover, you've never trained in the sword world before. Yi Chen reaching the 10th layer was still within Marquis Swordstar's tolerance. In any case, the other party had comprehended sword domain before him and reached the 10th layer. Being one layer higher than him didn't mean anything, as he would be able to catch up very quickly. If Yi Chen couldn't even pass the 9th layer, Marquis Swordstar would be disappointed instead. Wouldn't it be meaningless if the opponent didn't have enough strength? This Yi Chen is amazing. We were born in Sky Sword continent, so we have an innate advantage. He is only a sword artist of true spirit continent, but not only is his talent exceptional, he is also the first to enter life and death realm. His attainment in sword domain is not any lower than Marquis Sword Snow's. In my opinion, the top 3 sword geniuses are none other than him. Wood Sword King nodded. I'm more optimistic about Marquis Sword Snow. He has yet to enter life and death realm, but once he does, his sword domain might break through to the 2nd layer. Right, let's see if Yi Chen can pass the 10th layer and reach the 11th layer. If he can, it means that his attainment in sword domain is on par with Marquis Sword Snow. If he can't, it means that his previous accumulation has been used up, and he needs to accumulate strength again. Just like Marquis Swordstar's accumulation, he managed to reach the 9th layer. Subconsciously, the Life and Death Sword Kings were more optimistic about Marquis Sword Snow. After all, Marquis Sword Snow was from Sky Sword continent, and his talent in Sword Dao was indeed frightening. The 10th layer had the same number of sword artists as the 9th layer, 1,000. What was important was not the quantity, but the fact that the 10th floor's sword artists also had sword domain. Although it was the weakest sword domain, not even reaching the early 1st layer, the difference between having sword domain and not having sword domain was like the difference between heaven and earth. There was no comparison. Therefore, Yi Chen had to spend quite a bit of effort to kill them. The opponent's sword domain was weakening his sword domain. Puff. After killing the last sword artist, Yi Chen smoothly passed the 10th layer. 11th layer. The outside world was in an uproar. The difference between the 10th and 11th layer was like heaven and earth. The 10th layer was the peak of the 1st layer, while the 11th layer was the 2nd layer. The difficulty was 10 times higher. Marquis Swordstar's breathing paused. According to Master, the 11th layer still has 1,000 sword artists, but the sword domain is at the 1st layer. Even if Yi Chen's sword domain is at the 2nd layer, it won't be easy to pass. He won't be able to pass this layer. If the gap wasn't too big, Marquis Swordstar had the confidence to catch up. But, if the gap was too big, it wouldn't be easy. Just as Marquis Swordstar had said, the sword domain of the 1,000 sword artists had indeed reached the 1st layer. Back when Yi Chen fought Marquis Sword Snow, he was also at this level. But now, he had to deal with 1,000. Although these sword artists couldn't release their Jin Yuan, their long-range attacks were still extremely frightening. A dozen sword artists surrounded Yi Chen and used sword domain to weaken Yi Chen's sword domain. Die. Yi Chen's sword appeared and disappeared mysteriously, killing the first batch of sword artists. Chapter 942. 1,000 sword artists were divided into groups of a dozen, and Yi Chen had to deal with 60 to 70 groups. There was no gap between the groups. The consciousness of all the sword artists seemed to be connected as one. Before the former could be killed, the latter would have already taken their place, forming an endless cycle of battle. Under such circumstances, sword arts and movement arts were useless. The only thing that could be used was sword domain. Using sword domain to distort the trajectory of the opponent's sword, leaving them vulnerable, Yi Chen could easily kill them without much effort. Puff. The sword light flashed like lightning, and the last sword artist fell down. 12th floor. The hearts of the spectators fiercely twitched, and Marquis Sword Star tightly clenched his fists. The sword artists of the 12th floor had sword domain at mid-first layer realm. Without any exaggeration, even a peak sword king without sword domain would not be the opponent of these sword artists. Of course, this did not mean that Yi Chen could fight 1,000 peak sword kings alone. The main issue was that he only had a dozen sword artists at a time, and none of them could release their Jin Yuan and use sword chi to injure the enemy. He didn't even release his sword domain to the limit, and it was only about 70 to 80%. However, under such circumstances, the sword artists close to Yi Chen couldn't injure Yi Chen in the slightest. Their swords would either miss or collide, creating dazzling sparks. Sword after sword, Yi Chen seemed to be harvesting rice straws, cutting one after another. Heavens! He reached the 13th floor. Beside the heavenly sword, the spectators saw the numbers flashing on the barrier and cried out in alarm. The 11th floor was the initial stage of the first layer, the 12th floor was the mid-stage, and the 13th floor was the late stage. Yi Chen had entered the life and death realm not even half a year ago, but his sword domain had already advanced from the first layer to the late stage of the second layer. This kind of improvement speed was simply incomprehensible. Wood Sword King and the other Sword Kings also held their breaths and exchanged glances. When he arrived at the 13th level, Yi Chen finally felt a little strenuous. It wasn't that he couldn't handle it, it was just that he wasn't as calm as before. The swordsmen surrounding him had reached the late stage of the first level of sword domain, and it was slightly counteracting his sword domain. Yi Chen's advantage was gradually shrinking. What happened? The place where the Sky Sword was located was the holy land of the Sky Sword continent. There would be people rushing over at all times. Those who had just arrived did not understand the situation and asked, "Yi Chen is challenging the sword world." Someone answered, "How many levels have you challenged the sword world? Have you passed the 10th level?" "It's already the 13th floor." "What?" All kinds of answers were the same and repeated. The 13th floor was a high ground. Yi Chen stood at the highest point of the high ground. Below him, swordsmen surged up like a tide. They were like ants returning to their nest, advancing wave after wave. Sword light crisscrossed and figures moved. All of the swordsmen collapsed without exception, dissipating into nothingness. 13th floor, cleared. Upon reaching the 14th floor, Yi Chen's strenuous effort increased by several folds. According to common sense, this was already Yi Chen's limit. This was because the 14th floor represented the peak of the second layer of sword domain. If he wanted to pass the 14th floor, he would have to reach the third layer of sword domain. Otherwise, it would be impossible. However, Yi Chen didn't plan to stop here. His goal in challenging the sword world was to break through to the third layer of sword domain. Once he obtained the third layer of sword domain, his battle strength would surpass 4 stars and reach 5 stars. In the future, he would no longer be powerless against titled monarchs like Nirvana Demon Emperor. On the 14th floor, Yi Chen finally revealed all his cards, no longer being careless. Kill. Wave after wave of swordsmen collapsed, and several faint sword scars appeared on Yi Chen's body. These sword scars were caused by the sharp chi flow of swords. Although they didn't directly hit him, they were still extremely dangerous. A slight carelessness would result in a sword strike. Perhaps, a slight deviation might not be enough to kill him. However, he wasn't facing a single swordsman, but countless swordsmen. If he was hit once, he wouldn't be able to escape a second time. The 14th floor of Sword World is indeed the limit of the second layer of Sword Domain. I've only killed 500 or 600 people, but I can't hold on any longer. Yi Chen's Sword Domain was extremely powerful, but it also had a limit. When dozens of swordsmen at the peak of the first layer attacked him at the same time, it was hard to avoid some openings. Fortunately, Yi Chen's soul was 10 times stronger than ordinary life and death kings. The more dangerous the situation, the calmer he could be. At the critical moment, he could always turn the tide. If it were another king with a weaker soul, Yi Chen would have already been killed by the swords. 700, 800, 900. Yi Chen's mind was extremely focused. The numerous swordsmen's sword arts seemed a bit slow in his eyes, while his sword pierced out at an extremely fast speed. 999,000. After an unknown amount of time, Yi Chen's eyes turned red, and blue veins popped out on his forehead. His body emanated an unapproachable murderous aura and sharpness. Huff! After killing all the swordsmen, Yi Chen's taut nerves immediately relaxed, and he began to pant heavily. The benefits of Sword World were simply too many. It made Yi Chen's sword arts more practical and more intrinsic. The ultimate goal of sword arts was to kill. Whether it was to do evil or to do good, it couldn't change its intrinsic nature. And Sword World stimulated the potential of one's sword Dao, allowing one to enter a state of selflessness. Under this state, every move and style would possess extreme destructive power, making it even more perfect than usual. After passing through the 14th layer of Sword World, Yi Chen's close combat strength might not have undergone a complete transformation, but it had at least risen by a level or two, allowing him to easily crush his previous self. 15th layer. Yi Chen arrived at the 15th layer. The outside world was in an uproar. Everyone was incomparably shocked. 15th layer. Yi Chen had actually reached the 15th layer. Could it be that his sword domain had already reached the 3rd layer? How could this be? In the entire Elysium, only Azure Sky Sword Emperor had reached the 3rd layer. What kind of person was Azure Sky Sword Emperor? He was a godlike figure in Skysword continent. 15th layer, not to mention me, even Marquis Sword Snow will feel a trace of despair. Marquis Sword Star felt helpless for the first time. Even when Yi Chen was the first to enter Life and Death Realm, he didn't have such a feeling. After all, entering Life and Death Realm earlier didn't mean much to him, as he would have done so sooner or later. Sword Domain was the embodiment of a sword artist's sword Dao talent. No matter how high one's cultivation base was, if one's sword Dao talent wasn't high, one wouldn't be able to obtain a good result in Sword World. Such a feeling flickered for a moment, and Marquis Sword Star soon regained his composure. Yi Chen, I hope you can stay far ahead. If you're even a bit slower, I'll immediately catch up. Marquis Sword Star was indeed worthy of being called one of the top sword geniuses of Skysword continent. Frustration and helplessness couldn't extinguish his fighting spirit, only making him stronger. Yi Chen had no idea about the uproar outside. He only knew that the current him could be killed by a flurry of swords at any time. The reason he could reach the 15th floor wasn't because his sword domain had broken through to the 3rd layer. If he had, he wouldn't have had to suffer so much. The reason he could reach the 15th floor was because apart from his sword domain reaching the peak of the 2nd layer, his soul was also 10 times that of ordinary kings. This allowed his concentration to be even more focused, and his perception of the outside world became even sharper. Sometimes, a slight error could lead to a huge error. The slightest advantage in soul could be magnified by 100 folds, let alone Yi Chen's soul, which was 10 times that of others. However, it was clear that a powerful soul could only support Yi Chen to the 15th floor. Wanting to pass the 15th floor was a pipe dream, unless his sword domain made a breakthrough. 30th, 31st, 32nd, 40th. Poochie. After killing 40 sword artists, Yi Chen had finally been hit by a sword, and his left arm had disappeared. Under such circumstances, Yi Chen still didn't give up. Holding the sword in his right hand, he killed 2 sword artists charging at him. However, he was immediately stabbed in the left abdomen by another sword artist. Poochie, Poochie, Poochie. In the next moment, Yi Chen was pierced through by a flurry of swords. Inside the invisible barrier, Yi Chen, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, opened his eyes. I didn't expect the 15th floor to be so difficult. Each sword artist's sword domain has reached the early 2nd layer, and I'm only at the peak of the 2nd layer. Within the same layer, killing 42 is my limit. Alright, if I can't make a breakthrough once, I'll make it twice. If that doesn't work, I'll make it a 3rd time. This time, I won't easily return until my sword domain reaches the 3rd layer. Closing his eyes, Yi Chen directly sat cross-legged on the ground of nothingness, recuperating and storing up his energy, preparing for his next adventure in the sword world. After a long time of silence, everyone knew that Yi Chen had failed to pass the 15th floor. That's right, Yi Chen was able to pass the 15th floor because his sword domain had reached the 3rd layer. However, It was impossible to pass the 15th floor in one go. Yi Chen's failure made everyone heave a sigh of relief. No matter how monstrous Yi Chen was, he was still a human. If Yi Chen had passed the 15th floor, they wouldn't have believed that Yi Chen was a human. How could they know that Yi Chen hadn't reached the third layer of his sword domain? Of course, Yi Chen couldn't explain it to the whole world. What's going on? Why hasn't Yi Chen come out yet? Don't tell me he still wants to adventure. The land of nothingness inside the invisible barrier was very mysterious. No matter how many people entered, they wouldn't run into each other. This way, even if their consciousness entered the sword world, their bodies outside wouldn't encounter any mishaps. However, since they couldn't see Yi Chen, everyone became somewhat anxious. 1 day. 2 days. Soon, a week had passed. Most of the people who had been waiting here had gone back. Marquis Sword Star had gone back 3 days ago. Only a small portion had stayed behind. They were either waiting for the sword world or waiting for their friends. However, there were still a few who were really waiting for Yi Chen to come out. In this week, the news of Yi Chen reaching the 15th layer of Sword Realm spread like a storm throughout the Skysword continent, causing an uproar. Chapter 943. On this day, the people waiting outside suddenly discovered that the numbers on the invisible barrier were flashing rapidly. From 1 to 10, there wasn't much of a pause. After that, it continued to rise, from 11 to 14, and finally to 15. It's Yi Chen. Yi Chen is challenging the sword world again. Apart from the Azure Sky Sword Emperor, no one else could reach the 15th level of the sword world. Apart from the Azure Sky Sword Emperor, there was only Yi Chen who created a miracle a week ago. In the 15th level of the sword world, Yi Chen had already killed 74 swordsmen, 32 more than the previous time. His improvement was obvious. Kai. Swinging his sword, sword light swept out. At the price of losing his left arm, Yi Chen killed another 6 swordsmen, bringing the total number of kills to 80. 81. 82. 83. Who? Yi Chen's head suddenly flew up. A swordsman leaped up and chopped off Yi Chen's head. However, Yi Chen, who had lost his head, took advantage of the fact that his body had yet to dissipate to stab the swordsman's heart. 84. This was the second time that Yi Chen challenged the 15th level of the sword world. The first time, it was 42. This time, it was 84. The improvement was huge. Challenging the sword world was too exhausting. Just like the previous time, Yi Chen didn't continue. Instead, he sat cross-legged in the void and rested. Failed. After a long time, no numbers flashed. Everyone knew that Yi Chen had failed again. Some even stood up and left this place. Some of them had been waiting here all along, and some had joined later. Those who joined later actually wanted to see Yi Chen and see if he had grown 3 heads and 6 arms. However, Yi Chen still didn't come out. They immediately knew that they wouldn't be able to see him in person for a short period of time. Instead of waiting here in vain, they might as well find something proper to do. Let's go. The 15th floor isn't that easy to pass. The higher you go in the sword world, the harder it is to pass. Yi Chen has only raised his sword domain to the 3rd level. I dare to bet that he won't be able to pass through the 15th floor without 3 to 5 months of training. That makes sense. Every level of the sword domain requires one to grasp more details. Otherwise, the Azure Sky Sword Emperor wouldn't have been stuck at the 3rd level of the sword domain for so many years. Go. I still want to wait. Of course, there were also people who didn't change their minds. Idiot. Just wait here for nothing. What a waste of time. This time, instead of waiting for a week, Yi Chen went to challenge the sword world after only 3 days. Failure. It was another failure. But something worthy of gratification was that Yi Chen had killed 156 swordsmen in the 15th level of the sword world, and he was only 8 away from doubling the number. Moreover, the sword domain showed a trace of budding. Another 3 days passed. Yi Chen had killed 258 swordsmen, 285 swordsmen, 300 swordsmen. In the blink of an eye, it had already been 20 days since Yi Chen had arrived here. During the first 10 days, his improvement was extremely great, but during the last few days, his improvement became slower and slower. Yi Chen knew that he was almost at his limit. Not to mention doubling the number of swordsmen, it was as difficult as ascending the heavens to be able to kill a few more every time. The extent of his improvement was getting smaller and smaller. On the 24th day, Yi Chen had killed 333 swordsmen. When he killed the 333 swordsmen, Yi Chen faintly felt that the sword domain had stirred. But he was helpless as he was instantly killed. This won't do. As time passes, this budding will gradually weaken. In the end, I might lose this rare opportunity to break through. I absolutely can't waste it. Without resting, Yi Chen's eyes were red as he tried to enter the sword world again. From the first level to the 14th level, Yi Chen had to expend several times more energy than usual. This was because he was too tired. This kind of fatigue wasn't physical, but mental. The potential that people often talked about was actually the potential of the heart and soul. When the heart was strong enough, it could ignore the weakness of the body and burst out with power that far exceeded the past. Now, Yi Chen's mind was very tired, and so was his body. As a result, when he reached the 15th level, Yi Chen had only killed the 15th swordsman, but he already felt powerless. "Explode for me," Yi Chen roared. The treasured sword was like an exploding star. The sword light that was thrust out was extremely fast and ruthless. Each move and style contained great power. PFFF, 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 PFFF. A row of swordsmen fell. They didn't even feel how they were stabbed. But to Yi Chen, this wasn't enough. More swordsmen rushed up. At this moment, Yi Chen was in a state of extreme selflessness. His treasured sword was constantly stabbing and slashing. His body was like a marionette, flickering and shifting at an extraordinary speed. Row after row of swordsmen fell. Yi Chen's body emitted a heart-palpitating aura. The aura was like a saber or a sword, slowly merging into Yi Chen's sword domain. Just like this, Yi Chen endured one limit after another. The number of swordsmen he killed quickly broke through 500, then 600, 700. But when 720 people fell, Yi Chen once again felt powerless. This kind of powerlessness came so quickly that Yi Chen's left leg was cut off by a sword, and his body almost fell. After waking up from his selfless state, Yi Chen saw more than 10 swords with sharp sword light stabbing towards him. No matter how he dodged or blocked, he couldn't avoid this assassination. Although the sword domain could slightly distort the opponent's sword trajectory, at least half of the swords would still land on his body. The outcome was already decided. Yi Chen's eyes were very calm. This didn't mean that he had a way to deal with it. His powerful soul allowed him to maintain absolute focus no matter what. Deviate a little more. Deviate a little more. The speed of the swords was very fast. Ordinary people wouldn't even have time to react. But in Yi Chen's perception, the swords stabbing towards him were getting slower and slower, showing signs of coming to a stop. An inconceivable scene occurred. All the swords really stopped, maintaining a distance of 3 feet from Yi Chen. Clang, clang, clang. In the next moment, the swords that had stopped stabbed forward again. However, the trajectories of the swords were greatly deviated. When the swords collided, resplendent sparks erupted. The sparks couldn't get close to Yi Chen. Their trajectories were distorted, and they erupted outwards. On the other hand, Yi Chen was like a sword god. No sword in his hand, but a sword in his heart. 3rd level sword domain, completed. After losing a leg, Yi Chen couldn't move quickly. But it didn't matter. At this moment, there was no need for him to dodge. Before anyone's sword could stab him, he would stab them to death. 3rd level sword domain represented a new realm. The core profundity was to have a sword in your heart and not have a sword in your hand. Having no sword in his hand meant that he had no weaknesses. Having a sword in his heart meant that he could always block his opponent's attack with his sword. Nothing could be faster than the speed of the heart. With a thought in his heart, the sword stabbed out. At this moment, his body and heart had completely fused together. Since a long time ago, Yi Chen had learned that there were 3 realms when it came to sword attacks. The first realm was called sword control with the body, the second was sword control with qi, and the third was sword control with intent. Body was the physical strength of the body. Everyone had this realm, but there weren't many who were proficient in it. Some people wasted a lot of energy, but their sword speed wasn't ideal. Some people could casually increase their sword speed to a frightening level. This was the gap in technique. It needed to be tempered hundreds and thousands of times in order to improve. Sword control with qi was much better than sword control with the body. Before the body moved, qi had already been released. This qi was the energy within a martial artist's body. Although many people had high cultivation, they might not have grasped the technique of sword control with qi. Gathering Jin Yuan in the palm and then striking with the sword wasn't called sword control with qi. At most, it was just an enhanced version of sword control with the body. This was because the main idea of sword control with qi was to use qi as the main force, and the body as a support. Physical strength was used as a support. Under such circumstances, the sword would be much faster than others. Finally, sword control with intent. This intent was the will. Will was formless. It was precisely because it was formless that the sword speed could reach an unfathomable level. No one could block it. And the so-called sword control with intent was to use the heart to control the sword. A strong will was actually a strong heart. Will was formless, and the heart was also formless. Sword domain had reached the 3rd layer. Yi Chen's sword realm had impressively reached sword control with intent. In other words, it was the highest realm of sword control with heart. When the sword pierced out, nothing could block it. Pu. A horrifying scene occurred. No matter how fast the sword attacks of the sword artists were, no matter how ingenious they were, Yi Chen would always be able to kill them before they could. In fact, Yi Chen didn't even release his sword domain to the limit. It was because the sword artists of the 15th layer weren't worthy of him using his full strength. He only needed to use sword control with heart to deal with them. 1,000 sword artists were all dead. Yi Chen stood on the mountain peak. Sigh, let's wait a few more days. It's not a solution to keep waiting like this. If he wants to challenge the sword world for a year, won't I be waiting for a year in vain? In the outside world, some extremely patient people finally couldn't wait any longer. It wasn't that they didn't have patience. On the contrary, they were very patient. Otherwise, they wouldn't have waited until now. But first and foremost, they were sword artists. They needed to increase their strength in order to survive. Their time wasn't used to wait. They're right. Within 3 to 5 months, it'll be very difficult for Yi Chen to pass the 15th layer. He might not even be able to accomplish it in a year. I won't wait any longer. What's the point of waiting for a few more days? Everyone, farewell. As he spoke, one of the swordsmen stood up and was about to leave. However, he suddenly stopped. Look, the 16th layer. He has reached the 16th layer. This person pointed at the invisible barrier. His eyes were wide open and his face was filled with disbelief. The 16th layer? Everyone turned to look at him. It really is the 16th layer. This. Everyone looked at each other and held their breath. Impossible, the 17th layer. After around the time to drink a cup of tea, a new ancient character flickered on the invisible barrier, 17. Chapter 944. On the 15th floor, all the swordsmen were at the initial stage of the 2nd layer. On the 16th floor, it was the intermediate stage of the 2nd layer. On the 17th floor, it was the late stage of the 2nd layer. If it was before, it would be difficult for him to deal with 3 to 5 swordsmen. After all, his sword domain was only at the peak stage of the 2nd layer, which was only a small level away from the late stage of the 2nd layer. He could easily suppress his opponents in a one-on-one fight, but it would be a little difficult for him to deal with 3 to 5 swordsmen at once. He could only rely on his superb swordsmanship to kill them, but it would also be a little dangerous for him. In fact, Yi Chen was a special case. If it was someone else who had just broken through to the 3rd layer of the sword domain, they could at most reach the 15th floor. It would be impossible for them to reach the 16th floor. However, Yi Chen reached the 17th floor. This was an anomaly. Yi Chen knew that the reason he could reach the 17th floor was not because of the third layer of the sword domain, but because of the ability to control the sword with his heart. Reaching the third layer of the sword domain didn't necessarily mean that one would grasp the ability to control the sword with his heart. However, once one grasped the ability, the sword domain would definitely reach the third layer, or even the fourth layer. The two were related, but not necessarily. By relying on the ability to control the sword with his heart, Yi Chen's close combat strength had increased by several times, and his overall strength had also increased by a level. Of course, the ability to control the sword with his heart didn't increase much in terms of offensive strength. If his offensive strength was high enough, there would be only a few 5-star battle prowess that could be a match for Yi Chen. On the 17th floor, Yi Chen's lost left leg had already recovered. Pushing the third layer of the sword domain to the limit, Yi Chen's figure moved like a god, and the sword in his hand stabbed out repeatedly without any warning. Every stab would inevitably cause a swordsman to fall to the ground. There was no sword, only heart-palpitating sword light. Kill. Yi Chen's killing intent was constantly increasing. If these swordsmen were living beings, then Yi Chen would have definitely killed tens of thousands of people in these 20 days. Every time he killed a person, Yi Chen's skill would increase by a bit. Up until now, Yi Chen's sword art was no longer just a sword art, it had risen to a kind of art of killing. However, the 17th level wasn't so easy to pass. Towards the end, crisscrossing sword scars appeared on Yi Chen's body. This was an extremely dangerous sign. Not to mention the slightest bit of carelessness, if he didn't maintain a state of surpassing his limits at all times, he would immediately be killed by the flurry of swords and expelled from the sword realm. Fortunately, after comprehending sword control with the heart, Yi Chen's mental state was surprisingly good. His mind was no longer so easily fatigued. Instead, the more he fought, the braver he became. 17th floor, passed. The 18th floor. In the outside world, the number 18 flashed on the invisible barrier. Those who saw this scene almost spurted out a mouthful of blood. Was there an end to this? Either he was stuck in the 15th floor for more than 20 days, or he suddenly advanced by leaps and bounds, rushing to the 18th floor. No one could endure such a huge stimulation. One must know that even the Azure Cloud Sword Emperor had only reached the 18th floor. Is it a ghost trying to break through the sword realm? Some people thought nervously. The 18th floor corresponded to the peak of the third level of sword domain. For Yi Chen to be able to reach this floor, not to mention that no one would be able to do it in the future, it was almost unprecedented. However, the 18th floor and the 17th floor were completely different. Not to mention that the swordsman here had reached the peak of the second level of sword domain, the swordsman's swordsmanship was forcibly raised to a higher level. From the first to the 17th floor, the power of the swordsman's swordsmanship was about the same. Even if there was an increase in power, it wouldn't be too ridiculous. But on the 18th floor, the swordsman's swordsmanship was unbelievably powerful. Every single one of them was a genius swordsman. Although Yi Chen was a genius, he couldn't resist the encirclement of so many genius swordsmen. After killing only 3 swordsmen, Yi Chen was killed. It wasn't that he wasn't strong enough, but that the 18th floor was too abnormal. Dozens of swordsmen had surrounded him, and even the heart-controlling sword ability couldn't stop them. Being able to kill 3 swordsmen was already commendable. Amazing. In the void, Yi Chen opened his eyes, his expression filled with amazement. The sword realm contained countless swordsmanship. Up until now, he hadn't seen many that repeated themselves. On the 18th floor, the first batch of swordsmen had all possessed powerful swordsmanship comparable to Marquis Swordstar's 7-star point killing sword art. It was to the extent that he couldn't exist for even a split second. In that split second, he could only kill 3 swordsmen before being killed. The sword realm was worthy of being the sacred land of Skysword Continent. Not to mention anything else, merely being able to experience countless swordsmanship was a great benefit. Yi Chen had only created 1 or 2 styles of vibrational sword arts, sky-shattering sword arts, and autumn water sword arts. Originally, If he wanted to create more, it would have been impossible without a few years. However, at this moment, Yi Chen had countless inspirations. Thousands of swordsmanship were playing out in his mind, each of them different, containing the lifelong effort and wisdom of the masters of these swordsmanship. Fortunately, my soul is powerful enough to hold so much information on swordsmanship. Yi Chen's soul was 10 times that of ordinary life and death kings, and the amount of information he could hold was also 10 times that of ordinary kings. Moreover, he had photographic memory. This photographic memory was not an ordinary kind of photographic memory. If memorizing a book was photographic memory, it would be the lowest grade of photographic memory. Any Sea of Soul Realm martial artist could do it. Yi Chen's photographic memory allowed him to memorize thousands of swordsmanship in his mind and extract them at any time to deduce them. Of course, Yi Chen was not a god. He could deduce all the swordsmanship below the 10th layer, but the swordsmanship above the 10th layer contained more than just information. A glance was not enough. I'll deduce the swordsmanship below the 10th layer first. As for the swordsmanship above the 10th layer, there's still a long way to go. Yi Chen decided to leave. Biting off more than one could chew was a principle that everyone understood. However, only a few could do it. There were several thousand swordsmanship below the 10th layer, which was enough for Yi Chen to digest for a while. The incorporeal barrier rippled, and the blue-robed Yi Chen walked out. Yi Chen. It's Yi Chen. Everyone stood up with fiery expressions. If they were somewhat unconvinced of Yi Chen before, thinking that the rumors were exaggerated, then right now, they only had admiration. How many people could pass through the 18th layer of the Sword Realm? Azure Sky Sword Emperor was the only one, and now, Yi Chen was added to the mix. If they were unconvinced, then what else could they be convinced of? If they couldn't even acknowledge someone else's talent, then they weren't fit to be a sword artist. Yi Chen didn't expect that his appearance would cause such a huge commotion. Yi Chen, you're not going to continue? A sword artist mustered his courage and asked. Yi Chen smiled, not anymore. I'm going back to digest. Yi Chen, I wonder if you're taking disciples. My son is 13 years old this year, and his talent is amazing. If he can become your disciple, it would be his fortune. Seeing that Yi Chen wasn't as cold as before, a middle-aged sword artist said with a face full of hope. Yi Chen, I also have a grandson. My granddaughter. For a moment, everyone recommended their juniors to Yi Chen. If they could become the disciple of a peerless sword Dao genius like Yi Chen, 1 in 10,000 years, their future accomplishments could be easily imagined. For Yi Chen to be so powerful at such a young age, he must have a unique path of development. Yi Chen's thoughts flickered. He had never thought of taking disciples before, because he didn't even have enough time. How could he teach disciples? It would be good enough if he didn't mislead them. But now, it was necessary for him to take disciples. A powerful master was only one person, but a powerful disciple was many people. The Yi family couldn't be guarded by him alone. It was not that he didn't have confidence in the Yi family, but with the resources of the Yi family, it would be hard for them to produce a life and death king. Although his brother Yi Xian had great talent, becoming a life and death king was still as hard as ascending the heavens. Otherwise, if any genius with great talent could become a life and death king, life and death kings would be everywhere. Apart from this, Yi Chen also had the thought of unifying the sects. Yi family, Sky Cloud Martial School, and Eternal Sky Martial School all needed his care. If it was feasible, he would combine these 3 forces and form a Sword Dao sect. Of course, whether it was feasible or not, he would have to go back and discuss it. If it really didn't work, then he would think about it again. Everyone, taking disciples is not a business. If you all have sincerity, you can find me at the Yi family of South Rudra region. I, Yi Chen, will never accept disciples who only look impressive. You all should be prepared for this. However, if your talent is not bad, you can also become an attendant of my Yi family. When I have time, I will also impart my experience and sword arts to them. Yi Chen's words were watertight and full of sincerity. True Spirit Continent South Rudra region Yi family. Alright, I will bring my grandson there next month. At worst, I will spend a lot of spirit stones and use the conveyor gate. From True Spirit Continent to Skysword Continent, there were a few conveyor gates in operation. However, the cost would be too high, and ordinary people wouldn't be able to afford it. But there was no need to teleport from Skysword Continent to True Spirit Continent at once. One could teleport a bit at a time. Between the two continents, there were also many islands with conveyor gates. Alright, Yi Chen will take his leave first. Everyone, I hope to see you again. After saying these words, Yi Chen's figure flickered and directly entered the void, disappearing in the blink of an eye. On this day, the news of Yi Chen reaching the 18th layer of Sword Realm spread out at a frightening speed. On this day, the news of Yi Chen's willingness to accept a disciple also spread out along with the former, causing a huge impact on the Skysword Continent. Everything had its pros and cons. Yi Chen's actions made all the Sword Kings of Skysword Continent extremely unhappy. Someone from their own continent running off to another continent to find a master? What was this? This was Skysword Continent, not something True Spirit Continent could compare to. Yi Chen immediately became a thorn in the eyes of all the Sword Kings of Skysword Continent. In the void, Yi Chen was shuttling back and forth. Sword Domain has broken through to the 3rd layer, and its might has increased greatly. However, the consumption of Jin Yuan is also enormous. My cultivation base is still a bit low. Blackwater Alliance, it's time for you to bleed. Without returning to Yi family, Yi Chen streaked across the sky of True Spirit Continent, flying in the direction of Blackwater Alliance. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.